In an unfortunate twist of fate, Adrian, a man from the 21st century, is accidentally killed by the goddess of fate. As recompense for her mistake, she grants Adrian a second chance at life in an alternate world. Upon awakening, Adrian is startled to find himself surrounded by a setting reminiscent of 18th-century Europe. It quickly becomes apparent to him that he has been reincarnated as none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, the indomitable figure who once ruled over Europe for 2 tumultuous decades. Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Napoleon Bonaparte, Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Huh? Where am I? Adrian looked around, and he noticed that he was standing on a cloud, surrounded by a breathtakingly beautiful landscape. In the distance, he could see snow-capped mountains, pristine lakes, and verdant forests, all bathed in a warm, golden light. But his attention was quickly drawn back to the woman before him. She was the epitome of beauty and grace, with golden blonde hair that cascaded down her back in soft waves. Her slender body seemed to glow with an otherworldly radiance, and her skin was as pale as snow, flawless and smooth. As she stepped forward, Adrian could see that her eyes sparkled with an otherworldly light, a soft blue that seemed to reflect the very essence of the sky itself. Her wings were pure white, with delicate feathers that shimmered in the gentle light. For a moment, Adrian was speechless, lost in the sheer beauty of this creature before him. It was only when she spoke that he realized that he was no longer on Earth. "Greetings, Adrian," she said, her voice soft and melodious. "I am Seal, the goddess of fate. Welcome to the afterlife." Adrian's mind reeled as he tried to comprehend what was happening. He had heard of the idea of an afterlife before, and he had never believed in it. As he stood there, taking in the surreal scenery and the angelic figure before him, Adrian couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. Was this truly happening, or was it all just a dream? Seal seemed to sense his confusion, and she smiled gently at him. "I know this might be overwhelming for you, Adrian, but I assure you that this is real. You have passed on from your mortal life, and now you are here in the afterlife." Afterlife? What was she talking about? Recalling his previous memories, Adrian was in his room, playing his favorite real-time strategy game. When he closed his eyes momentarily to rest his eyes and opened them, he was here in this world. "Afterlife?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, and continued. "But I was very alive earlier. Is this some sort of a prank?" "Allow me to explain to you, Adrian," the goddess said. "The truth is, you are not supposed to die today. I made a mistake where I accidentally cut your thread." Adrian's eyes widened in shock at her words. "Cut my thread? What do you mean?" Seal looked apologetic. "I am the weaver of fate, Adrian. It is my responsibility to oversee the threads of life and ensure that everything follows its course. But in your case, I made a mistake. I accidentally cut your thread prematurely, and you were taken from the mortal realm before your time." Adrian felt a surge of anger and frustration rise within him. "So, what? You're telling me that I died because of a mistake?" Seal held up a hand to placate him. "I understand how you feel, Adrian. That is why I'm presenting myself in front of you, to compensate. A chance of a new life with your memories intact." "New life? Another world?" Adrian repeated. "I don't want that. I want to return to my world." Seal's expression softened. "I understand that it may not be easy to accept, but unfortunately, I cannot send you back to your world. Your mortal body has already perished, and your thread has been cut. This is the only way to make things right." Adrian felt a lump form in his throat. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was all too much for him to take in. But what about my family and friends? What will happen to them? Seal's eyes filled with compassion as she spoke gently to Adrian. I understand this may be difficult for you to accept, but unfortunately, they'll grieve at your sudden death, but they'll eventually move on and have a good life. You want me to show you a glimpse of their future? Can you do that? Adrian asked. I'm the goddess of fate, Adrian. I can do it if you want. Then, show me, Adrian permitted. Seal flicked her wrist and suddenly, a vision appeared before Adrian's eyes. He saw his parents sitting in their living room, surrounded by friends and family. They were all dressed in black, their faces drawn with grief. Adrian felt a pang of sadness as he watched them weep for him. But as the vision continued, he saw that slowly but surely, they began to move on with their lives. He saw his brother graduating from a prestigious university and landing a good job, his sister becoming one of the most successful businesswomen in the country, and his little sister pursuing her dreams to become a doctor. Adrian couldn't help but feel glad that they are having a good life even when he is gone. He was the oldest and the breadwinner of the family, providing for his little brother and sisters. Before perishing, he was an engineering student and a professional gamer. He consistently got good grades and at the same time won tournaments, which makes him enough money to support his education and family. To think that his sacrifice will bear fruit with them being successful is something that brought a sense of comfort to Adrian. As the vision faded, Adrian wiped away his tears and turned to face Seal. Thank you for showing me that. It's comforting to know that they'll be okay. Seal nodded. I'm glad I could provide some solace for you. But Adrian, you must understand that your thread has been cut. There's no going back to your mortal life. However, I can offer you a new beginning. Adrian looked at her curiously. New life? You mean like the ones in novels where a person is reincarnated in another world and gains overpowered skills? Well, you can say that, Seal concurred. But the world I'm sending you has no magic, so it won't be the same as the one you have read. However, I can still bless you with something that will make you powerful. Consider this as compensation for my mistake. A world without magic, huh? Adrian hummed in thought. I will bless you with powers that you only can possess. They say knowledge is power, and so I will grant you that power. You will have an encyclopedic knowledge of all things scientific. How the plane flies, how the cars move, and how the steam engine works. As an engineering student, you might know those concepts, but can you make one with your current knowledge? Adrian shook his head. No. Then I'll give you the knowledge and experience to make one, even if you haven't had the chance to build one before, it'll feel natural to you. The second power I'm going to grant you is the ability to defend yourself. I'll bless you with the art of combat so you can protect yourself in this new world, Seal said. Adrian furrowed his brows. Wait. I think I'm starting to understand. Are you sending me to a world that's centuries behind mine? Like the medieval ages or something? Seal's lips curved into a gentle smile. You're exactly right. I've prepared a world for you that's far behind in terms of technology and culture compared to your previous world. I see. Adrian stroked his chin. So this is going to be similar to the technological gap genre I read in novels. I don't know, but this is making me excited. With those two powers, you will be able to thrive in this new world, Seal said. Why don't we test it now? Explain to me the Krebs cycle. Adrian's eyes widened in surprise as Seal asked him to explain the Krebs cycle. It was a topic he had heard before in his biology class but never dived deeper into it. So naturally, he wouldn't know the answer, but oddly enough there are words formulating inside his brain, constructing for an answer. Then as if in an impulse, his mouth moved. The Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle, and it is a series of chemical reactions that occur in the mitochondria of eukaryotic cells. It's a fundamental pathway that plays a critical role in the cellular respiration process. The cycle starts with the conversion of acetyl-CoA and oxaloacetate into citrate, which then goes through a series of reactions that generate ATP, NADH, and, wait a minute, how do I know this? See? Even if you have no prior knowledge of a certain subject, you will naturally understand it. Of course, if you are unfamiliar with one subject, it won't come out, right? But with the power I blessed you with, you can use it like a Wikipedia like the one in your world. Take a look. Suddenly, a game-like user interface popped up in front of Adrian. Host, Adrian Gonzalez. Search. Books. Psychology, religion, history, geography, pedagogy, mathematics, economics, quantum mechanics, astrophysics, geology, organic chemistry, molecular biology, fine arts, physical communication, agronomy, horticulture, soil science, agricultural engineering, animal science, languages. This is like a game. Adrian muttered under his breath. Now for your second ability, which tests your fighting skills. Defeat these two experienced martial artists that I summoned. Seal flicked her finger and two figures materialized beside her. Without warning, the two martial artists lunged at Adrian simultaneously, their movements fluid and coordinated. Adrian observed them carefully, his eyes following their every move as they approached him. He noted the way they positioned their feet, the way they clenched their fists, and the way they breathed. As they closed in on him, Adrian took a step back and lifted his arms, his fists clenched tightly. The first martial artist, a tall and muscular man, aimed a roundhouse kick at Adrian's head. Adrian ducked, avoiding the attack, and then countered with a swift jab to the man's stomach. The blow knocked the wind out of the man, causing him to stagger backward. Meanwhile, the second martial artist, a shorter but more agile fighter, attempted to land a kick to Adrian's legs. Adrian stepped to the side, evading the attack, and then delivered a powerful uppercut to the man's chin. The impact sent the man flying through the air, and he landed hard on the ground. Adrian stood in a defensive stance, his eyes fixed on the two martial artists as they got back on their feet. He could see the determination in their eyes, the fierce will to win. But Adrian was determined too. This is his new power, and he couldn't be more excited to test and explore it. The martial artists attacked again, this time more aggressively. They unleashed a flurry of punches and kicks, trying to overwhelm Adrian with their speed and strength. But Adrian was ready for them. He dodged and weaved, his movements were fluid and graceful. He parried their attacks and then delivered lightning-fast counterattacks, each blow landing with precision and force. The martial artists fought with everything they had, but in the end, it was no match for Adrian's skills. With one final blow, he knocked them both out cold, leaving them sprawled on the ground. Adrian stood there for a moment, catching his breath and assessing his victory. That was, surprisingly easy, he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. So what do you think? Seal asked. I don't know, the feeling is indescribable. Well, now that you have got a taste of your new power, I will send you now to your new world. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Will I be reborn as a baby? Adrian asked. In reincarnation novels and manga he read, most often the main characters were reborn as a baby. Sometimes they possess a new body so that they can conveniently avoid the problems of infancy. If he were to choose, he would want to be reborn as a baby because it would feel weird to him to possess the body of a man he doesn't know. You will be reborn as a baby, Adrian, Seal announced. Adrian sighed. Okay, I think I'm ready now. Stand in the middle of the circle as I prepare the spell for your reincarnation, Seal said, gesturing to the magic circle that appeared before him. Adrian stepped forward, feeling a sense of excitement and trepidation wash over him. He felt a sudden rush of energy, like a gust of wind blowing through him. He felt weightless, like he was floating in midair. Colors swirled around him, blurring together in a kaleidoscope of light. Moments after, Adrian disappeared. As consciousness slowly returned to him, he felt his tiny, fragile body being tenderly wiped down and wrapped in a soft, warm cloth. His attempts to move were feeble, and he struggled to open his eyes against the brightness of the world around him. His senses were overwhelmed by a rush of unfamiliar sounds, smells, and sensations. Gradually, his vision cleared, and he saw a beautiful woman with flowing, chestnut hair holding him in her arms. Her eyes were pools of warm, maternal love, and her delicate fingers brushed gently against his skin. It dawned on him that he had been reincarnated into the body of a newborn baby. The chill in the air made him shiver, and he cried out in frustration at his lack of control over his new body. His cries were met with a soothing coo from the woman holding him. The woman spoke softly, her voice like honey. "My dear Napoleon," she murmured. "You're so cute." Napoleon? Is he calling him Napoleon? The one he read in the history textbook who was said to be the greatest military general of all time? Did I just get reincarnated as Napoleon? As Adrian lay there, unable to turn his head to see his surroundings, he could sense that he was in a place of great comfort and luxury. The room was adorned with plush furnishings and rich fabrics, and the woman who held him was clearly well cared for and well off. Moments later, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Soon, the door creaked open and several figures entered the room. Adrian's new mother turned to greet them with a smile. The first to enter were two young maids dressed in crisp white uniforms, their hair neatly braided and tied back. They carried with them trays of food and drink, offering them up with a respectful bow. Behind them, Adrian could see the imposing figure, a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern expression. He wore fine, tailored clothes that spoke of his wealth and status. That might be his new father. "Has it been born safely, Letizia?" the man asked. "Yes, my love," Letizia replied with a respectful bow. "He is a cheerful baby." The man stepped closer to them, and Adrian could see his face more clearly now. He had sharp features and piercing brown eyes, and black hair. "Let me see him," the man said, his voice softening slightly. Letizia held Adrian out for his father to see, and he gazed down at him with a mixture of curiosity and affection. "He looks healthy," the father remarked, his eyes lingering on Adrian's face. "And handsome too, like his father," he added with a small smile. "Geez, you're so silly dear," Letizia responded, giggling softly. "He inherited your blue eyes dear, and he got my handsomeness and black hair," the father remarked. "Is that so?" Letizia leaned over and scanned Adrian with her aqua-blue eyes as if looking for those inherited traits. You're right dear. He got my eyes." Adrian watched the exchange between his parents, taking in every detail with his newborn eyes. Based on what he heard just now, he was able to understand their words. Maybe it's another skill gifted by the goddess to make it convenient for his transition. He might also not be their only child, given the fact that there was a boy who trailed behind his new father as he entered the room. In addition, the faces of his new parents were young, like they were in their early 20s or younger than that. In addition, their name is similar to the name of Napoleon's parents. Whether this is a coincidence or not, it can't be ignored. Adrian thought that he'll be reincarnated in another world, but it turns out he was just sent back to the past. Adrian's eyes widened as he took in his surroundings. The lack of modern appliances, combined with the oil lamps, confirmed that he had been reincarnated into a different time period, specifically late 18th century. Suddenly, Letizia jostled Napoleon, who shifted him in her arms. "Are you hungry, little one?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. Adrian realized that he was, in fact, quite hungry. He felt a familiar ache in his stomach that he had experienced in his previous life. Letizia lowered her clothes and Adrian caught a glimpse of her breast. He knew what was coming next. But as he tried to process this new experience, he found himself conflicted. He was a grown-up dude in his previous life, so the thought of sucking the breasts of a woman who seemed to be younger than him feels unethical. Letizia, unaware of Adrian's internal conflict, cradled him close to her chest and began to breastfeed him. At first, he felt a sense of disgust, but as the warm milk flowed into his mouth, Adrian's hunger dissipated and a blissful calm washed over him. Being an infant is scary. To think that his instincts took over him just like that made him realize that he has no full control over his new body. Is this going to be a problem in the future? He thought to himself. Well, there's only a limited thing an infant can do. He'll have to wait a year or two to be able to control his body fully. 5 years have already passed since Adrian's reincarnation. As an infant, Adrian took time to learn languages and letters. It wasn't until 2 years later that Adrian became proficient in language skills, which is still relatively early compared to other children. Despite this, Adrian still had the tendencies of a young child when it came to basic communication skills such as talking and gesturing. Adrian made sure to maintain a pleasant relationship with his parents by playing the role of an ideal child, and he was surprised to find that he genuinely enjoyed their company. Now that Adrian has reached the age of 5, he finds that he is capable of much more than before. He was able to read books that allowed him to learn about the world. He was born on the island of Corsica, which was once a part of the Republic of Genovia. He learned of its struggle for independence in 1755. Despite the Genovese efforts to quell the uprising, the Corsicans refused to back down and, after a fierce battle, emerged victorious and gained control of the island. However, the Republic of Genovia faced financial difficulties and intense pressure from Franconians, leading to its decision to sell Corsica to France in 1768, marking the end of Corsica's independent rule. He was born in the year 1769, making him a citizen of the Kingdom of France. As for his family, his father, named Carlo, was a Corsican politician and a fervent supporter of Corsican nationalism and was respected in political circles for his advocacy of the Corsican cause. But soon after, his allegiance began to shift towards France when he was appointed as a representative to the court of King Louis XVI. However, this decision was not without consequences. Carlo's support for French rule was seen as a betrayal by many of his fellow Corsicans, and his political career in Corsica suffered greatly as a result. Despite this, Carlo remained steadfast in his belief that Corsica could achieve greater prosperity and autonomy under French rule, and he continued to work towards this goal in his position as a representative of the French court. As for his mother, Letizia, she was a devoted wife and mother who took great pride in her husband's achievements and her children's education. Letizia was a strong-willed woman who had been raised in a noble family, and she had instilled her love for culture and education in her children. She spent countless hours reading to Adrian and his siblings and encouraged them to learn as much as they could. Speaking of siblings, he has one sibling, who is his elder brother, Joseph Bonaparte. The one that he saw in the room where he was delivered. Their mother was currently pregnant with another one, and if history is the same as his previous world, then the next one would be Lucien. While he is learning the history of his new world, he is slowly accepting the fact that he was sent back in time instead of reincarnating in another world. Could it be that the goddess of fate wants him to follow Napoleon's destiny? Adrian knew a lot of things about Napoleon, how he got to his position and he lost it. Is the goddess of fate giving him an opportunity to change the course of history and follow a different path? The idea excited Adrian, and he felt a sense of purpose that he had never felt before. Or perhaps maybe this is his purpose. Thinking about it, the goddess of fate gave him abilities that are basically cheating in this world. He has access to information on modern technology, politics, and records of battles within a hand's reach. He can use it to gain a huge advantage in this world. In his previous life, he was playing a popular real-time strategy game about creating kingdoms and civilizations. It was his favorite game, and the thought of him becoming the supreme ruler over a kingdom is tempting, as he can experience it in real life. I know my destiny now. Napoleon pumped his fist. At that moment, Adrian took the name of Napoleon. He is one of the best generals in history, but Adrian can make it even greater. Napoleon struggled to adapt to his new life in a world devoid of modern technology. Without computers to distract him or the internet to browse, he found himself constantly bored and restless. He longed for the days when he could play video games or connect with friends online. But even if he had access to these luxuries, he wouldn't be able to enjoy them freely. In Corsica, where he now lived, the locals were hostile towards his family for what they perceived as a betrayal. They believed that Carlo, his new father, had accepted a bribe from the French to secure a position in King Louis XVI's court. The same people who once respected him for being a pro-Corsican now saw him as a traitor. Napoleon couldn't even go outside without fearing for his safety. The Corsican kids were particularly vicious towards him, as they blamed him for his family's actions. He felt trapped and alone in this strange new world. Fortunately, the luxuries of the modern world mentioned above were provided by the system the goddess of fate gave him upon his reincarnation in this world. It is more like a web browsing tool than a system that helps a person strengthen themselves by completing a quest, as he read in the novels. Oftentimes, he would stay in his bedroom for hours staring at the user interface, reading books, and watching videos. That's right, it seems like his tool can play videos, making it easy for him to pass the time. He is currently browsing the history of France, as he viewed that the country that he was in right now was based on that country. If he wants to survive in this world, he'll have to know the events that happened prior to France becoming a republic. The revolution was sparked by a growing dissatisfaction among the French people with the monarchy and the aristocracy, who were seen as corrupt and out of touch with the needs of the common people. He learned about the storming of the Bastille, a prison that represented the tyranny of the monarchy, and how it became a symbol of the people's power over their oppressors. He read about the Reign of Terror, a period of intense violence and political repression, and how it ultimately led to the downfall of the monarchy and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, or so his rise to power. While browsing his tool, he wondered if the history would play out the same, just like in his previous world. As he thought about it, there was a knock on the door. "Who is it?" Napoleon asked. "It's Joseph." "May I come in?" came a reply from the other side of the door. Napoleon waved his hand in the air, prompting the floating computer screen to disappear, and sat up straight on his bed. "Come in." The door creaked open, revealing a small boy with curly brown hair and bright blue eyes stood in the doorway. Joseph was a year older than Napoleon, and had a cheerful disposition that seemed to contrast with Adrian's somber mood. He wore a simple tunic and trousers, both made of rough wool, and carried a small basket of fruit in one hand. His other hand was hidden behind his back, and Napoleon wondered what he was holding. "Bonjour, Napoleon," Joseph said with a wide grin, walking into the room. "I brought you some apples and pears from our orchard." He held out the basket for Adrian to take, revealing the object in his other hand, a small wooden figurine, expertly carved to resemble a horse. "And I made this for you," Joseph exclaimed, holding out the figurine. "You always look sad, and I thought it might cheer you up. Consider this as an advance birthday gift." "Really?" Napoleon couldn't help his lips to form a smile. "Thank you, brother. I'm glad that you like it. Well, I'm concerned that you have been staying all day in your bedroom. I wonder why that is. Is it because no one wants to play with us?" "That's one of the reasons, brother, but the other one is that I'd rather stay alone in this bedroom and read some books." "Not much of a problem, but do come out and play with us sometimes. Not everyone is hostile to us, you know," Joseph said with a smile. Napoleon nodded, appreciating his brother's concern. "I'll try to come out more often," he said, and looked at him. He had been studying more about Joseph Bonaparte and how he would play in history. According to his studies, Joseph was a prominent figure in the politics and military affairs of the Napoleonic era, serving as King of Naples, King of Spain, and as the head of the Bonapartist government in exile. In 1795, Joseph was appointed as the French ambassador to Rome, and he played a significant role in the establishment of the Roman Republic in 1798. After Napoleon's rise to power, Joseph became one of his closest advisors and served as a key figure in the French government. In 1806, Napoleon appointed Joseph as King of Naples, and he served in this position until 1808 when he was transferred to Spain to become King of Spain. Joseph's reign in Spain was marked by numerous challenges, including a popular uprising against his rule, as well as conflicts with British and Portuguese forces. Despite these difficulties, Joseph was able to implement significant reforms in Spain, including the abolition of the Inquisition, the establishment of a constitutional monarchy, and the promotion of education and infrastructure development. Not only that, Joseph Bonaparte was considered to be a capable and intelligent politician and administrator. As King of Naples, Joseph was credited with instituting significant economic and social reforms, including the construction of new roads and bridges, the improvement of agriculture, and the establishment of a centralized system of government. These reforms were widely seen as positive and beneficial to the people of Naples. However, Joseph's tenure as King of Spain was much more controversial, as his attempts to modernize and centralize the Spanish state were met with widespread resistance from the Spanish people, who saw him as a foreign usurper. Despite his efforts to promote education and infrastructure development, Joseph's rule in Spain was marked by social unrest, economic turmoil, and military conflict, which basically was caused by his lack of understanding of Spanish culture and politics. According to some writings, Joseph was loyal to Napoleon, and served a key figure in his rise to power. Meaning, the man standing in front of him is a person of great importance. It'll be in Napoleon's best interest to keep a close relationship with him, as he'll serve as a tool for his rise to power. While lost in thought, their mother, Letizia, arrived in Napoleon's room. "Joseph, your friends are outside asking if you want to play with them," Letizia said, her voice silky smooth. Napoleon's gaze flickered to her mother's belly. Based on its current size, her due date must be approaching soon. Joseph turned to his mother with a smile. "Thank you, Mother. I think I will join my friends outside for a little while. Can you tag Napoleon along with you?" Letizia asked, looking at Napoleon. Joseph turned and looked at his brother. "Do you want to come with me, Napoleon? I'll introduce you to my friends." Napoleon smiled at the offer. He had been feeling cooped up in their house lately, and some fresh air and new acquaintances would do him some good. "Yes, I would like that very much," he replied, getting up from his chair. Letizia smiled at Napoleon's response. "Wonderful. I'm sure you boys will have a great time together. Just be back before dark." "Yes, Mother." Napoleon and Joseph intoned together before leaving the bedroom. 5 minutes later. Napoleon and Joseph already felt the sweltering heat of the sun beating down on them as they head towards the location where Joseph is waiting. Napoleon wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and looked at Joseph. "Do you think this is a good idea, brother? Playing under the sun like this?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Joseph shrugged. "I'm used to the heat," he replied with a small smile. "Besides, I don't want to miss out on the fun." Speaking of which, waiting for them were Joseph's friends. Napoleon counted them in his head. There are 6 of them. All are about the same age as them. "We have been waiting for you, Joseph." "I thought you were not going to play with us," said one of his friends. Sorry. I was speaking with my brother when you came." "Oh, here is my little brother Napoleon. He'll be playing with us today." All of his friends turned to look at Napoleon. "Ah, so that's your brother, huh?" One of his friends walked forward. "Hello. My name is Albert, nice to meet you." Napoleon nodded and shook Albert's hand. "Nice to meet you too, Albert," he replied with a smile. The other friends also came forward to introduce themselves. There was Pierre, France, Jacques, Antoine, and Michel. Napoleon tried to remember their names as they greeted him warmly. "So, what do you guys want to play?" "Honestly, I'm tired of hide-and-seek. Let's try something different." "Then, why don't we tag?" Antoine suggested. "We already played that," Michel shook his head. Napoleon might have an idea. France looked at Napoleon, who was suddenly taken aback. He hadn't expected to be asked for suggestions that early. He glanced at the group, who all looked at anticipation. Well, have you guys ever played Capture the Flag?" he asked tentatively. The boys looked at each other, considering the suggestion. "Sounds interesting, how do we play?" Jacques asked. Napoleon took a deep breath and began to explain the rules in detail. "Okay, so we divide into 2 teams. Each team has a flag, and the objective is to capture the other team's flag and bring it back to your own base without getting tagged by the other team's players. If you get tagged, you have to go to jail, and the only way to get out is if one of your teammates tags you. The team with the most flags at the end of the game wins." The boys listened intently as Napoleon explained the rules, nodding and asking questions as needed. When he finished, they all seemed excited to give it a try. "Sounds fun. Let's do it," Antoine exclaimed. The boys quickly divided into 2 teams, and Napoleon found himself on the same team as Joseph, Albert, and Pierre. They huddled together to strategize before the game began. As they ran out to start the game, Napoleon felt a rush of excitement. It has been so long since he has participated in outdoor activities. Most of his time as a college student is playing video games before and after school, which bored the hell out of him. With his team's flag in hand, he sprinted towards the enemy base, dodging and weaving past the other team's players. It was a close call, but he managed to make it back to his own base with the flag, earning cheers and high-fives from his teammates. The game went on for hours, with both teams putting up a good fight. In the end, Napoleon's team emerged victorious, with 3 captured flags to the other team's 2. They all collapsed onto the grass, panting and sweating from the intense game. As they lay there catching their breath, Napoleon felt a sense of camaraderie with Joseph's friends. "That was fun. How about we play another round?" Pierre asked. "Let us rest first, you stupid," Joseph chuckled, but he also looked pleased. "Thanks for suggesting Capture the Flag, Napoleon. I had a great time." Napoleon smiled. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. I had fun too." "Don't you mean we all had a great time?" Michel corrected. Napoleon laughed, realizing Michel was right. "Yeah, we all had a great time." "It was a good suggestion," he said, feeling a sense of pride in his contribution to the group's enjoyment. As they rested, a group of kids approached them. "Hey, this is our turf. Who gave you permission to play here?" A tough-looking kid stepped forward, glaring at the boys. Joseph stood up and walked up on him. "Your turf? What are you talking about? Do you have a plaque posted around here that says that this is your turf, Ivan? You are looking for a fight?" Napoleon could feel the tension in the air as the tough-looking kid and Joseph squared off. He sat up, ready to intervene if things got out of hand. But to his surprise, Joseph remained calm and composed, despite the other boys' aggressive stance. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said evenly. "But neither are we going to let you bully us off this field." "Oh, you have some guts in you, huh? Wait, I think I know you. Are you the son of that traitor who sold us out to the French?" Ivan's friends who were standing behind murmured at one another. Napoleon could hear them snicker and mock. But he didn't let it distract him from the situation at hand. He stood up, placing himself between Joseph and Ivan. "Look, we don't want any trouble," Napoleon said firmly. "If this field is really yours, we apologize for intruding, but we didn't see any signs or markers indicating that it was off-limits." Ivan glared at him, sizing him up. "And who are you supposed to be?" "Napoleon," he replied, meeting Ivan's gaze without flinching. There was a moment of silence as Ivan and his friends exchanged glances. "He is my little brother," Joseph spoke. "Now, just as my little brother said, we don't want any trouble. So why don't you leave us alone peacefully? How dare you, a child of a traitor, tell us what to do?" Joseph took a step forward, his eyes flashing with anger. "My father was not a traitor." "Ho! But my father said your father received a high position in the French court." Ivan glanced at his friends, who were looking at him warily. "And why are you all lumping with a traitor's son? Have you no shame? His father is the reason why we are being oppressed by the French." "Just go away, Ivan," Pierre said. "Not before you leave our turf," Ivan said before flickering his gaze back to Joseph. Joseph sighed. "Come on, guys, we finished playing the game anyway, so let's go." Napoleon, Joseph, and their friends reluctantly began to gather their things and make their way off the field. As they walked away, Ivan and his friends laughed. Napoleon could feel his blood boil at the way Ivan and his friends were treating Joseph. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anger that he hadn't experienced in a long time. But he knew that fighting back would only make things worse, so he gritted his teeth and kept walking. As they walked, Joseph spoke quietly to Napoleon. "I'm sorry about that. Ivan and his friends can be really aggressive sometimes." Napoleon shook his head. "You don't have to apologize for anything. You did the right thing by not letting them intimidate you." Joseph smiled faintly. "Thanks. Well, I try my best to hold back, not to resort to violence. So guys, let's play a game tomorrow." "I'm in," Jacques said. "Me too." Michel followed, and the rest of them. 4 years later, in the year 1777, Napoleon was now 9 years old. An age old enough to start attending school. He was standing before the mirror as he tidied himself up, combing his hair to a slick-back style. Today was a big day for him, as he will depart from Ajaccio to the capital of France, where he will attend a military school. In those 4 years, Napoleon made some plans on how he would rise up to the ranks of the social hierarchy. Even though Napoleon's family is a minor nobility, they are considered part of the third estate of the social class in France. Why are the social classes, you wonder? Well, they are based on one's birth, wealth, and occupation, among other factors. The first estate is composed of the clergy, the second estate of the nobility, and the third estate of the commoners. That social class would soon crumble in the face of revolution. There are 4 ways to rise through the social class. Military service was one of the most common ways for a person from a humble background to rise up to the ranks of the nobility. Napoleon himself is a great example of this. Second, marriage. Marrying into a noble family was another way for a person from the third estate to gain a higher social status. A person from a wealthy family could use their wealth to arrange a marriage with a member of the nobility. Third is a purchase of titles. A person could also purchase a title of nobility with a large sum of money. However, this method was often frowned upon by the established nobility. Fourth is education. Education is a means for a person from the third estate to gain a higher social status. If they could afford it, they could attend prestigious schools or universities and gain the necessary skills and knowledge to rise up the social ladder. Lastly, service to the monarchy. Service to the monarchy was also a way to gain noble status. This could include serving as an advisor to the king or queen, or serving in a high-ranking position in the royal court. Those ways are only applicable at the time, but for Adrian or Napoleon, he has one thing that he can use to rise through the ranks aside from his destiny of serving military service, that is introducing modern technology with the use of the blessings of the goddess of fate. Though sadly, it is unlikely that inventing modern technology alone would be enough to elevate him to the ranks of the nobility, as social status was largely determined by birthright and family connections during that time period. However, if he were able to gain the support and patronage of influential members of society, such as wealthy merchants or aristocrats, he may be able to climb the social ladder to some extent. His expertise and inventions could also be valuable to the government or military, which could potentially earn him a title or recognition for your contributions. So he had decided, he would introduce some modern technologies that would definitely transform the social landscape little by little while pursuing a military career. For that, he had already drawn up schematics of the future inventions he might introduce. From cosmetics, personal care products, to steam engines and rifles. As he finished fixing his hair, Napoleon caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. He was taller now, and his face had lost its childlike roundness. He looked more mature than most children his age, which often made him feel out of place. But today, he felt like he was taking a step toward his future, toward the destiny that he knew awaited him. "Okay, I look handsome in this," Napoleon muttered as he straightened his jacket. He then left his bedroom and went downstairs where his family was waiting for him. Downstairs, he saw his family standing in the living room, watching as he walked down the stairs. "You look lovely, my dear," Letizia said with a smile as she hugged Napoleon tightly. Carlo patted his son's back and gave him a proud smile. "Are you ready for this, son?" Carlo asked. "I've been ready for this my whole life," Napoleon replied confidently. "Very well then. You're going to do great things, my boy," Carlo said as he hugged Napoleon. After a few minutes, it was time for Napoleon to leave. He hugged his brother, Joseph, and planted a kiss on Lucien's forehead. Lucien was the new addition to the family, a very important figure for his rise to crown in the future. "I will visit back when I can," Napoleon said, glancing at his family once more. He took a deep breath and spoke. "Okay, this is it, wish me luck on the entrance exam, everyone." "You can do it, son," cheered. "Thank you, Mom." Napoleon smiled warmly at her. "So, my son, once you arrive there at the military school, present this document to the headmaster." Carlo handed him a paper and continued. Napoleon took the paper from his father and studied it carefully. It contained all the necessary information about his identity, as well as proof of payment for the entrance exam. Admission to a school in this world was similar to his previous world. It follows the same process. A student would have to pay for an entrance examination, and if the student passed, he will be able to enroll and pay the tuition fee. Of course, the tuition fee will come later as the entrance examination hasn't started yet. "We will write you a letter every week," Letizia said. "I want to know if my son is doing fine alone there." Upon saying those words, Letizia's expression turned somber. The thought of her son leaving and staying there all by himself in the capital was overwhelming for her. She couldn't help but worry about his safety and well-being. "Don't worry, mother. I'll be fine," Napoleon reassured her, giving her a tight hug. "I promise to write back as soon as I can." Letizia smiled, but tears were starting to form in her eyes. She couldn't believe how much her son had grown in just 9 years, and now he was leaving home to pursue his dreams. Carlo patted Letizia's back and gave her a reassuring look. "He'll be all right, my dear. Our son is strong and smart. He'll make us proud." "Napoleon, do you have the ticket on you?" "Yes, father." With one last hug and a final goodbye, Napoleon left the house and boarded the carriage that will take him to the port. As the carriage moved forward, Napoleon looked out of the window and waved his hand to his family, who were watching him leave. 1 hour later, he arrived at the port. The port was bustling with activity, with merchants and sailors moving crates and barrels, and passengers hurrying to board their ships. The salty sea air filled Napoleon's nostrils as he stepped off the carriage and onto the cobbled street. The sound of seagulls and the crashing of waves against the dock could be heard in the distance. Napoleon looked around, trying to find the ship that would take him to Paris. He saw a number of ships docked, each one different in size and design, with flags of different colors flying from their masts. He felt a sense of excitement mixed with apprehension as he realized that this was just the beginning of his journey. He walked towards the harbor, passing by vendors selling fish and other seafood, and sailors repairing their ships. He felt a sense of awe as he saw the large ships towering above him, their wooden hulls and rigging stretching high into the sky. The sails of some of the ships were being hoisted, ready to set sail for their next destination. As he walked closer to the pier, Napoleon saw a ship with a black and white flag flying from its mast. He remembered that his father had told him that this was the ship that would take him to the capital. The ship was a medium-sized brigantine, with 2 masts and a small deck. He saw the crew busy loading crates and barrels onto the ship, and he could hear their shouts and laughter as they worked. Napoleon took a deep breath and walked up to the boarding agent, who was checking tickets and supervising the boarding process. "Is this the ship to Toulon?" Napoleon asked. The boarding agent looked at Napoleon and nodded. "Yes, this is the ship that will take you to Toulon," he said, taking the ticket from Napoleon and checking it. "You are in cabin number 7. Please make your way to the deck and wait for further instructions." Napoleon nodded and followed the boarding agent's instructions, making his way to the deck of the ship. He saw other passengers, some of them families with young children, others solo travelers like himself. They were all eager to begin their journey. He walked over to the ship's rail and leaned against it, gazing out at the sea. The scenery before him was peaceful and of ethereal quality. Moments later, the ship's horn sounded, signaling that it was time to set sail. The crew members untied the ropes that were holding the ship in place, and slowly but surely, the brigantine started to move away from the dock. Napoleon watched as the coastline of Corsica receded from view, and the ship sailed into the open sea. He felt the gentle sway of the ship beneath his feet, and the cool sea breeze on his face. He closed his eyes, taking it all in, and smiled to himself. "This is it, this is where it will all start." Napoleon lay on the bed, feeling nauseous and dizzy. The sound of the waves crashing against the hull of the ship made him feel even more queasy. He tried to distract himself by calculating the estimated time of arrival at the port of Toulon. The distance between Corsica and Toulon is approximately 323 kilometers. Assuming good weather and wind conditions, the brigantine speed will be 9 knots. Given those two values, it will take the ship 19 hours and 40 minutes to arrive at Toulon. That means 19 hours of more suffering. Napoleon sighed and closed his eyes, feeling helpless. He had never felt so sick in his life, and the thought of spending another 19 hours on the ship was daunting. He knew he had to find a way to cope with his seasickness, or else the rest of the journey would be unbearable. He contemplated, wondering how to cope with seasickness. And in an instant, a thought formulated inside his mind. The effect of his one ability granted by the goddess of fate. To cope with seasickness, one must stay hydrated to replace the fluid loss from sweating and vomiting. Napoleon read out his thoughts. So I just need water, huh? Napoleon sat up and reached for the water pitcher on the small table beside his bed. He poured himself a glass of water and slowly sipped it, trying to calm his stomach. Aside from water, his mind also suggested that ginger could also help with seasickness, and he wondered if the ship's kitchen had any ginger tea. Feeling a little better, Napoleon got up from the bed and decided to explore the ship. He walked up to the deck, taking small steps to avoid feeling dizzy. The sea breeze helped him feel a little more refreshed, and he saw the crew going about their duties, unfazed by the rocking motion of the ship. As he wandered around, he spotted the ship's kitchen and decided to go in and ask if they had any ginger tea. Fortunately, they had and gave him a cup. Napoleon held the cup of warm ginger tea and took a deep breath, savoring the aroma of the ginger. He took a sip and felt the warmth spread through his body. The taste was strong and spicy, but it was also soothing to his stomach. Ginger is a natural remedy for nausea and vomiting, and it has been used for centuries to treat various digestive problems, including motion sickness. Ginger contains compounds called gingerols and shogales, which have anti-inflammatory and antiemetic properties. These compounds help to reduce inflammation in the stomach and prevent nausea and vomiting. Thanks to that tea, Napoleon was feeling a bit better and was able to enjoy the whole trip. 19 hours later, the ship arrived in the morning. The sight of Toulon port came into view and Napoleon felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had made it through the journey without any more bouts of seasickness. He took a deep breath of fresh air and looked around, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling port. As the ship docked, Napoleon grabbed his belongings and made his way off the ship, thanking the crew for their hospitality. He was grateful for their assistance during the journey and for providing him with ginger tea, which had helped him overcome his seasickness. Napoleon's journey was not over yet. He had to find a way to reach his final destination, which was Paris. Since there are no steam locomotives in this era, Napoleon would have to take the old-fashioned but classier, horse-drawn carriages. Luckily, there were horse-drawn carriages parked near the port, ready to take passengers to various destinations. Napoleon approached one of the carriage drivers. "Good morning, sir, how much to get to Paris?" Napoleon asked. His Corsican accent made the French coachman pause for a moment before responding. "Paris? That's quite a journey. It will cost you 150 livres for a one-way trip, and it will take approximately 3 days to arrive, depending on the weather and road conditions," the coachman replied. 150 livres, Napoleon repeated, his face frowning at the price of the trip. His father gave him 500 livres as an allowance for 2 months and the cost of transportation took 30% of that. He knew he would have to budget carefully during his stay in Paris. "All right, I'll take it. When does the carriage leave?" Napoleon asked, reaching for his wallet. "The carriage leaves in an hour. Please make sure you have your belongings ready by then," the coachman replied, collecting the payment. "Can I sit and wait inside?" Napoleon asked. Of course. The coachman opened the door of the carriage and gestured for Napoleon to get in. Napoleon stepped inside and sat on the cushioned seat, taking in the sight of the carriage's interior. The walls were decorated with intricate patterns and the seats were upholstered with a plush velvet. It was clear that he boarded an expensive type of carriage. He waited inside for 30 minutes, passing the time by opening his user interface while reading books. 30 minutes had passed and 3 other passengers boarded the carriage. With that settled, the carriage began its journey to Paris. The first day of the journey was uneventful, and Napoleon spent most of the time gazing out the window, watching the French countryside pass by. He saw fields of wheat and sunflowers, picturesque villages, and small streams. The carriage ride was bumpy, but Napoleon found it comforting, almost like a lullaby. As the sun began to set, the carriage stopped at a small village, and the coachman informed Napoleon that they would be staying overnight. Napoleon was relieved to stretch his legs and get some rest. The coachman took him to an inn, and Napoleon settled into his room for the night. The next morning, Napoleon and the 3 passengers woke up early and resumed their journey. The second day of the journey was more eventful than the first. The carriage encountered some rough roads, causing Napoleon to bounce around in his seat. The other passengers were also visibly uncomfortable, but none of them complained. Instead, they chatted amongst themselves, exchanging stories and jokes. Napoleon listened to their conversation, trying to pick up on their French accents and improve his language skills. The third day was a pleasant journey for Napoleon and the passengers, and the scenery is starting to change, from flat fields to the palaces and chateaux that surrounded the outskirts of Paris. "We are arriving in Paris," the coachman announced from the front seat of the carriage, interrupting Napoleon's thoughts. Napoleon sat up, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness as he gazed out the window at the grand city before him. The carriage entered the city through one of its famous gates, Porte Saint-Denis. The streets were filled with carriages, carts, and pedestrians hurrying about their daily business. Napoleon's eyes darted around, taking in the sights and sounds of the city. As they made their way deeper into the city, the buildings grew taller and more ornate, and Napoleon felt a sense of awe at the grandeur of it all. In his previous life, Adrian didn't experience traveling abroad, as it is expensive. But now, he just arrived in one of the most popular cities in Europe, albeit 200 years behind. Paris, this is where I will make my mark. The coachman announced their arrival, "This is our stop," as he skillfully brought the carriage to a halt. With a chivalrous gesture, he stepped down from his seat and opened the door for the passengers to disembark. Napoleon and his fellow travelers stepped out of the carriage onto the cobblestone streets of Paris. "Thank you, sir," Napoleon acknowledged the coachman's assistance with a respectful nod of his head. As he took in the sights around him, he couldn't help but notice the absence of the iconic Eiffel Tower that would later come to define the city. However, the ornate chateaux and other historic buildings that surrounded him were no less impressive. Despite the limitations of the era, Paris still emanated an air of sophistication and elegance that left Napoleon in awe. As he breathed in the fresh Parisian air, he couldn't help but feel excited for the adventures that lay ahead. He pulled out his notebook and checked his notes. "Okay, first off, I need to get to this school. Braine-le-Château, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Damn, why does French have to be so complicated?" Braine-le-Château is the military school that he is going to attend in the capital. According to his father, the Braine-le-Château was a military school for boys established in the late 17th century by King Louis XIV. It was a prestigious school but not an elite one. This school was also said to primarily cater to the sons of minor nobility and the bourgeoisie, and admission was based on merit and talent rather than social status or wealth. However, the curriculum was rigorous and aimed at producing skilled military officers, so the students who attended Braine-le-Château were generally highly educated and well-trained. "This is interesting," Napoleon muttered under his breath. "Now, where do I find this school? Is it walking distance or do I have to hail another carriage?" As he was talking to himself, a horse-drawn carriage passed by. "Hey, kid. Are you heading somewhere specific? I can take you there," the driver called out to Napoleon from his carriage. Napoleon hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to trust a stranger, but ultimately decided he needed to get to the school quickly and couldn't waste any time. He made his way over to the carriage and climbed in, taking a seat next to the driver. "Braine-le-Château, please," Napoleon said, hoping that the driver knew where the military school was located. "Ah, that place. That would be 12 sous, the coachman replied, holding out his hand for payment. Napoleon fished around in his pockets and handed 12 sous to the coachman. As he just handed his fare, he asked, "Is Braine-le-Château near here?" The coachman nodded and flicked his reins, urging the horses into motion. "It's a bit of a ride, but we'll get you there in no time," he replied, the sound of hooves clopping against the cobblestones echoing through the streets. As they made their way through the city, Napoleon marveled at the sights around him. He saw the towering spires of Notre Dame Cathedral in the distance, and the bustling markets of the Latin Quarter filled with merchants hawking their wares. The coachman deftly navigated through the crowded streets, expertly dodging pedestrians and other carriages. "So primitive," Napoleon observed. Well, what can he expect in the era when the Industrial Revolution is in its infancy? Good thing, in the near future, he would be the center of development once he started introducing modern technology in this era. After all, why does the goddess of fate bless him with encyclopedic knowledge in all things scientific if not to use? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the coachman slowed the horses to a stop in front of a large, ornate building. "Here we are, Brienne-le-Château," he announced, gesturing towards the entrance. Napoleon hopped out of the carriage and looked up at the imposing building that stood before him. The Brienne-le-Château was a grand structure that exuded a sense of authority and discipline. It had a classic French architectural style, with tall windows that let in the natural light and ornate carvings that adorned the walls. The facade was made of beige stone, and the roof was adorned with chimneys and dormers that gave the building a regal appearance. As he walked closer to the entrance, Napoleon could see that the doors were made of solid wood and were intricately carved with intricate designs. Above the doors was a stone arch that featured a coat of arms, which Napoleon assumed belonged to the school or the monarchy. He noticed the French flag, fluttering in the breeze on top of the building. "So this is where I will spend my 6 years, huh?" Napoleon muttered. He cleared his throat and straightened his jacket, and entered the chateau. Inside, he was greeted by a bustling foyer filled with students and staff members. The walls were lined with paintings and tapestries that depicted historical events and figures, and the floors were made of polished marble that gleamed under the warm glow of the chandeliers. Napoleon approached the reception desk, where a stern-looking woman in a black dress was busy writing in a ledger. She looked up as he approached, her expression softening slightly when she saw his face. "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" she asked in a polite but formal tone. "Ah, yes. I am Napoleon. I am here to take the entrance examination," Napoleon replied, trying his best to sound confident and composed. "Of course, monsieur. May I see your papers, please?" the woman asked, holding out her hand expectantly. Napoleon fished around in his bag and handed her the necessary documents. She perused them quickly before nodding in approval. "Very well, Monsieur Napoleon. Please follow me, I will show you to the examination room," the woman said, leading Napoleon down a hallway lined with classrooms and lecture halls. As they made their way to the classroom, Napoleon couldn't help but feel a pang of nervousness. This feeling is akin to him taking the entrance examination at the University of the Philippines, the one that he aced easily. But this one is different. Not only he was in another world in a country similar to France, but in another time period. Finally, they arrived at a small room at the end of the hallway. The woman opened the door and gestured for Napoleon to enter. "Good luck, monsieur. The examiner will be with you shortly," she said before closing the door behind him. Napoleon breathed deeply. "Okay, here we go." Napoleon surveyed the room. The spacious classroom was arranged in the typical fashion, with rows of wooden desks and chairs arranged in columns facing the front of the room. The desks were topped with inkwells and quill pens, and the chairs were made of sturdy wood with plush cushions. A large blackboard took up the front of the room, and a chalk tray ran along the bottom. The only source of light in the classroom was natural light coming from a tall window, which also gives a great view of the lush gardens outside. And by just looking around, it seems like Napoleon is not the only one who will take the entrance examination. So he took his seat at the back, by the window. He waited there patiently until students at his age began entering the classroom. They entered in groups, giving him the idea that they are friends, which Napoleon doesn't have for the moment. They were wearing nice clothing, reflecting their status and wealth. Rich kids, huh? Napoleon thought to himself as he watched them take their seats. Ever since his reincarnation, Napoleon had grown up in a modest household, and the idea of attending a school as prestigious as Brienne-le-Château had seemed like a far-off dream until recently. His father has invested a lot of money in him, believing that he can achieve greatness. And Napoleon isn't going to let him down. As more students filed into the classroom, Napoleon is beginning to sense that the entrance examination is about to start. Speaking of the devil, the proctor, a stern-looking man in his 40s, walked into the room and called for everyone's attention. Greetings, students. My name is Pierre Dubois and welcome to Brienne-le-Château's entrance examination, which will assess your skills and knowledge in writing, reading, arithmetic, geography, and history. As you all know, Brienne-le-Château is one of the most prestigious schools in the country, and we only admit the best and brightest students who demonstrate academic excellence, creativity, and a passion for learning. He paused to let his words sink in before adding, today's examination will consist of multiple-choice questions, essay questions, and practical exercises. The passing mark is 75%. If your test result is below that, then you will not be admitted into Brienne-le-Château. So I urge you all to do your best and show us what you're capable of. Napoleon listened intently to Dubois' words, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. This is really like the same experience he had in his college entrance examination in his past life. Dubois continued, before we begin, I want to remind you all of the importance of honesty and integrity. Cheating or any other form of academic dishonesty will not be tolerated and will result in immediate disqualification. I will distribute the test papers now. You may start once the test papers are handed out, and you will have 3 hours to complete the examination. Napoleon felt his heart racing as Dubois began passing out the test papers. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Seconds later, Dubois arrived in front of him and handed him the test paper. Okay, let's go. Napoleon screamed inwardly and read the first question. In the following passage from Voltaire's Candide, what does the character Martin mean when he says, Il faut cultiver notre jardin? Napoleon's eyes widened. What the heck is this question? GG, I haven't read the book Candide. Wait, il faut cultiver notre jardin means we must cultivate our garden in English. So, what is Voltaire trying to say? Napoleon racked his brains. He never expected that the questions would be difficult and that he had to answer that in essay format. Wait. Just as he was thinking, he has a Wikipedia system granted by the goddess of fate. So he opened the user interface and searched for relevant information about the passage. There he learned the meaning of the passage and quickly wrote down the answer. Reading questions is probably the hardest for him, as most of the questions asked in that field are related to books that Napoleon hasn't read yet. In writing, it is basically asking him to translate German, English, and Spanish sentences into French. Of course, he wouldn't know the answers to those questions, but thanks to the blessings he got from the goddess of fate, he was doing well. As for arithmetic, things are simpler. For example, the question in number 20 was to simplify the following expression, 2x plus 4y, x plus 3y. The answer to that basic question is x plus y. No formula is needed, it's all mental. But there are also head-scratching questions that kids of his age won't be able to answer, like, a rectangular field is 30 meters long and 20 meters wide. A path of uniform width runs all around it. If the total area of the path is 480 square meters, what is the width of the path? Of course, that question can be solved using the quadratic equation, which is a concept that kids of his age don't have any idea of. Speaking of which, he looked around briefly and noticed that most of the students are having a hard time. Some were muttering under their breaths, some were scratching their heads, and some were even biting their nails. He understood their struggles. After all, if he were to be honest, the test was hard. Really hard, like the school doesn't even want to admit new students, so they made it harder. But, unlucky for them, Napoleon is finding it easy with his skills. The answers for geography and history can be looked up in his user interface. Though he wasn't sure about the history, assuming that his previous world and this new world are the same, he might get it right. But this is just an assumption. And in less than 30 minutes, Napoleon stood from his seat and raised his paper. "I'm done." A collective gasp echoed throughout the room as everyone turned to look at Napoleon. Du Bois looked surprised but quickly composed himself and walked over to Napoleon's desk to check his paper. As the proctor of the exam, Du Bois knew the answers to the question, and as he read through his papers, he couldn't help but be amazed. Napoleon got all the answers correct, even the ones that seemed impossible. Du Bois looked at Napoleon with a mix of admiration and suspicion. He had never seen a student like Napoleon before. "Very well," Du Bois stammered. "You may go now, Mr. Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte, but I'd rather you call me Napoleon." Napoleon replied. "Napoleon Bonaparte." With that, Napoleon left the classroom, leaving his fellow exam takers to continue struggling with the exam. Meanwhile, one of the exam examiners sneered subtly. "He is done. In just 30 minutes? No way. It must be a mistake, his answers must be all wrong, because if I couldn't solve the hardest question, then that means no one can. Napoleon Bonaparte, I will remember you." The entrance examination went smoothly for Napoleon. Having a full blessing from the goddess really helped him on acing the test. Now, he only has to wait for 7 days to know if he will be admitted or not. Though truthfully speaking, he is confident that he has passed the exam. Looking back at the expression of the proctor earlier, he was stunned, completely dumbfounded upon seeing his test paper. Well, nothing is certain without an announcement. Exiting the Brienne-le-Château, Napoleon now faced another challenge. Where to stay? His father gave him an allowance for the week to rent a hotel where he can stay while waiting for an announcement. Should he fail the exam, the remaining money that he will have on the day will be used as a fare for his trip home. His father has placed a lot of trust and confidence in him, expecting that he will pass the exam. Returning home with a failure would be unacceptable and would bring great shame to his family. Napoleon walked around the town, searching for a place to stay. He asked the locals for recommendations, but they all pointed him to the same expensive hotels. He couldn't afford those hotels with the allowance his father gave him. As he was about to give up, he stumbled upon an old inn located on the outskirts of town. It was small and old-fashioned, but it had a cozy and homey feel to it. The owner, an old man, welcomed him warmly upon his entrance. "Welcome, young man. I'm Mr. Du Bois, the owner of this place." "Thank you, Mr. Du Bois," Napoleon said, taking in the cozy atmosphere of the inn. "It's a lovely place you have here." "Thank you. We take pride in keeping our guests comfortable and happy," he replied. Napoleon followed the old man and led him to a room. It was small but clean, with a single bed and a small writing desk. "This room is perfect for me," he said, nodding his head in approval. "The price is also reasonable," Mr. Du Bois said. "It includes breakfast and dinner." "That's great," Napoleon said, relieved that he wouldn't have to worry about food for the week. "How much is the room per day then?" "It'll cost you 15 livres per day, but I'll be happy to lower it down to 12. Consider it as an expression of my hospitality." Napoleon was pleasantly surprised by Mr. Du Bois' generosity. "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. I'll take the room for the week," he said with a smile. "Excellent, boy. You won't regret it," Mr. Du Bois said, patting Napoleon on the shoulder. As Napoleon settled into his room, he couldn't help but feel grateful for stumbling upon this quaint little inn. It was a far cry from the grand hotels he had initially considered, but it had everything he needed and more. The cozy atmosphere and warm hospitality made him feel right at home. Over the next few days, Napoleon spent his time exploring the town, visiting local cafes and shops, and getting to know the locals. He even struck up a conversation with Mr. Du Bois, who regaled him with tales of the inn's history and the town's colorful past. As the 7th day approached, Napoleon grew increasingly anxious about the exam results. He had tried his best, but he couldn't help but doubt himself. What if he had made a mistake on the test? Like a mistake where he used a modern concept to solve a mathematical problem. In the late 18th century, the process of solving fundamental mathematical problems was much different than it is now, and he wasn't sure if he had adapted to that mindset completely. On the morning of the 7th day, Napoleon woke up early, unable to sleep. He paced back and forth in his room, waiting for the postman to arrive with the news. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a knock came on his door. It was Mr. Dubois, with a broad smile on his face. "A postman arrived at my inn and was looking for you. He handed me this letter which, if I read correctly, was from Brienne-le-Château," he said, handing Napoleon a letter. "Dear boy, that's a prestigious university in the town. Why didn't you tell me that you took the entrance examination?" Napoleon felt a wave of relief wash over him as he took the letter from Mr. Dubois. "Thank you, sir," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. He tore open the envelope and scanned the letter quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. "I passed," he exclaimed, unable to contain his joy. "I passed the entrance exam to Brienne-le-Château." Mr. Dubois beamed with pride. "Congratulations, boy. That's wonderful news." But his joyous face fell suddenly after reading the last line of the letter. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office on the first day of school. Be sure to arrive on time," Napoleon read. Napoleon couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at the last sentence of the letter. What could the headmaster want to see him about? Was there something wrong with his exam results? His mind raced with questions as he tried to make sense of the situation. Mr. Dubois noticed the change in Napoleon's demeanor and asked, "Is everything all right, boy?" You can actually call me Napoleon, Mr. Dubois." "Oh, to answer your question, everything is all right." Napoleon tried to push his worries aside and focus on the positive news. He had passed the exam and was a step closer to achieving his destiny in this new world. "Okay then, I'll be heading back now." Napoleon nodded and closed the door as he left. He sat on his writing desk, deep in thought. He couldn't shake off the feeling of apprehension about the meeting with the headmaster. "Well, I guess I'll find it tomorrow." And the day came. It was his last day in the inn and he had donned himself in his formal attire, making sure that he looked presentable in front of the headmaster. Before leaving, Napoleon bid farewell to the owner of the inn. After that, he made his way to the gates of Brienne-le-Château. Though a school based on merits, Napoleon couldn't help but feel overwhelmed at the sight of the exquisite carriages pulling up to the school gates. He was used to a simpler way of life and this world of nobles and aristocrats was foreign to him. The students who were exiting the carriages even have their own butler assisting them. Talk about being privileged. But he pushed his thoughts and entered the gates. He made his way toward the headmaster's office, navigating the complex maze of corridors and staircases. Napoleon took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping into the room. The headmaster, a tall and imposing figure, sat behind a large desk, his eyes fixed on Napoleon. "You must be the new student," the headmaster said, his voice cold and formal. "I am Headmaster Duval. Take a seat." Napoleon sat down, feeling even more nervous under the headmaster's steely gaze. "I have asked to see you because I wanted to speak to you about something important," the headmaster said, his expression unreadable. Napoleon's heart began to race as he waited for the headmaster to continue. "I have read your application, your exam results, and your background. It seems that you come from a very humble upbringing," the headmaster said, his voice softening slightly. "And yet, you have managed to achieve full marks on the entrance examination. Not only that, you also went through all the questions that were designed to eliminate the weaker ones in a mere 30 minutes. We had several new students whom we had expected to top the exam, but their scores didn't even get close to yours. Napoleon chuckled nervously, overwhelmed by the praises of the headmaster. So that was it, huh? He just wanted to praise him. Thank you, Mr. Duval. I don't know what to say. Since you are the first student in our school to have gotten full marks, I am thinking of giving you a reward. How about a discount on the tuition fee? Instead of paying 500 livres per year, you will only have to pay 200 livres per year. That is if you maintain your academic performance throughout your time here, the headmaster said, his eyes still fixed on Napoleon. Really? Napoleon's eyes widened. That would be a great help for my family. That's great then. Very well, I must have taken a lot of your time. You must go to the registrar's office and get your timetable. There you will see the list of your subjects and the schedule of your classes, the headmaster said, standing up and signaling the end of their conversation. I wish you all the best, Mr. Bonaparte. I hope to see great things from you in the future. Napoleon nodded and stood up, bowing respectfully before leaving the room. This is what he has been waiting for aside from the announcement. The first day of school. Napoleon's eyes scanned over his newly acquired schedule, and he let out a thoughtful hum. He took note of the 7 subjects: French, Latin, maths, history, geography, drawing, music, fencing, and military fortifications, each allotted 1 hour of study time. With 3 subjects per day, he would have a full schedule. He couldn't help but reflect on his earlier days in a different world, where the school week was much different. Here, the academic week began on Monday and stretched all the way through Saturday, a full 6 days of learning. The first subject is 8 o'clock in the morning, which is math. Napoleon quickly went to the classroom. A moment later, he found the classroom, taking a deep breath before pushing open the door. The classroom was filled with other students, and Napoleon could feel their curious gazes on him as he made his way to an empty desk at the back of the room. He sat down, taking out his notebook and quill in preparation for the lesson. While at it, a group of students approached his desk. "You are Napoleon Bonaparte, right?" one of the students asked. Napoleon looked up to meet the gaze of the student who asked. Judging from his clothes, he could tell that the student was a noble. He had a refined look about him, with blonde hair that was slicked back in a fashionable style. His eyes were a bright blue, and his features were sharp and defined. Napoleon nodded in response, offering a small smile. "Yes, that's correct. It's a pleasure to meet you," he replied politely, noting the other students who had gathered around his desk. "So how did you cheat during the exam?" the student asked. "Excuse me?" Napoleon asked, taken aback by the accusation. The blonde-haired student scoffed, crossing his arms. "Don't act clueless, Bonaparte. It's obvious you cheated your way into this prestigious academy. Commoners like you don't typically get accepted, let alone score a full mark. The second highest grade was only 81%, and that was me. And to top it off, you're an outsider with an annoying accent." Instead of being angry at the students, Napoleon felt a bit amused. So this is going to be the start of his rough school days as Napoleon, who in history, was recorded to have been bullied because of his background and his accent. Though he couldn't care less about their feelings as he was a university student with the mindset of a 20-year-old. To him, they are just spoiled brats, born with a golden spoon, ultimately nothing more than their surname. I don't even care what you think if I cheated or not. As for me, the test was easy, even my friend in Corsica could have answered it with ease, Napoleon haughtily replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. The students around him looked shocked, not expecting such a bold response from the new kid. The blonde-haired noble student narrowed his eyes, clenching his fist. "Are you looking down on us, peasant?" The blonde student spat, his voice laced with anger. Napoleon simply shrugged, nonchalantly twirling his quill in his hand. "I'm not looking down on you, I simply can't fathom why someone of your supposed status couldn't manage a perfect score on an exam that was quite obviously tailored to your aristocratic abilities, Napoleon retorted. He leaned forward slightly, a glint of challenge in his eyes as he stared down the other student. Maybe you're not as smart as you think you are, or maybe you're just too lazy to put in the effort. Either way, it's not my concern. The students around them gasped in disbelief, shocked by Napoleon's boldness. The room fell silent, with all eyes on the two students. The blonde-haired noble took a step forward, his face turning red with anger. "How dare you?" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the classroom and drawing the attention of everyone present. He took a few steps forward, his face twisted in anger and disgust. "How dare you speak to me like that, you peasant? It's clear that you were raised without any manners or respect for those of higher standing. But don't you worry, I'll be sure to educate you on proper etiquette since you clearly have none." He sneered, his tone laced with venom as he glared at Napoleon. "Ah, this is a pain in the ass. Can you and your friends just go? You are too noisy." Napoleon's blunt response caught the noble student off guard, and he faltered for a moment before regaining his composure. He took off his glove and threw them at Napoleon's face. Napoleon's classmate gasped. Throwing one's glove at someone's face is a declaration of a duel. Napoleon caught the glove with ease, a smirk spreading across his face as he looked at the noble student. "A duel, is it?" Napoleon asked, raising an eyebrow. "Very well then. I accept your challenge." The noble student looked taken aback, clearly not expecting Napoleon to agree so readily. "Good. Meet me tomorrow morning, at dawn, in the courtyard. We shall settle this matter once and for all in fencing. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you as I'm sure you don't know what fencing is." Napoleon scoffed. "Okay then, but imagine what would happen if you were to lose to a commoner like me who doesn't have experience in fencing. Surely that would be humiliating." The noble student's face contorted with anger at Napoleon's words. "I will not lose to the likes of you," he spat, before returning to their desk. Seconds later, the teacher entered the classroom. The teacher looked around and saw Napoleon. "Oh, you are the kid who passed the entrance examination with flying colors, huh? I must say, the way you used the quadratic equation to solve one of the hardest questions I have come up with was quite impressive. How did you do it?" "Well, sir, it's simple really." He stood up and his eyes gleamed coldly. "I'm just good. I don't see any explanation behind it other than being so good." The blonde-haired student gritted his teeth, clearly infuriated at Napoleon's arrogance. "I'll remove that smug look on your face tomorrow," he whispered under his breath. After the class ended, Napoleon wasted no time in making his way to his dormitory within the school. As he stepped inside the dormitory, his eyes scanned the room, taking in the sight of the interior. The space was sparsely furnished, with a single bed in the corner and a small desk next to it. The walls were painted a dull beige color, and the only source of light was a single window that let in a faint stream of sunlight. Despite the lack of adornment, Napoleon felt a sense of relief wash over him as he settled into his comfortable bed. His first day of class is just as boring as the first day that he had in his previous world. It was an introduction where the professors would recount their credentials and the syllabus for the semester. However, on that very same day, he met a kid who did not hesitate to assert dominance over him. In all of the subjects, each student was asked to introduce themselves. And there he learned that the brat's name was Louis, son of Count Philippe of Montauban, though that's how he introduced himself. The brat kid has challenged him to a duel, fencing specifically, and he accepted the challenge. "Fencing, huh?" Napoleon muttered under his breath. He doesn't know how fencing works, but he had heard of it before from movies. Basically, it's two people trying to stab each other with a long, thin rapier while wearing protective gear. Napoleon spent the next few hours trying to learn as much as he could about fencing. He spent hours in the system the goddess of fate bestowed on him, poring over books on the subject. He practiced every spare moment he had, using wooden sticks to mimic styles and footwork he had read about. 5 hours later, Napoleon felt satisfied with his progress. It felt to him that he could win the duel tomorrow, as he had learned complicated and sophisticated moves in just that time frame. Maybe fencing is one of the skills included in the fighting skills the goddess of fate granted him, which is probably the reason why he learned fencing easily. But without a mock battle, he can't be too sure of himself. He needed experience, but there was no time for that. The only time when he will be able to put his practice to the test is the duel tomorrow morning. I hope the cheat the goddess of fate gave me was not a fluke, Napoleon said to himself. Finally, the day of the duel arrived. Napoleon and Louis faced each other in the courtyard of the school, surrounded by a group of curious onlookers. Fencing is not a sport for peasants, Louis sneered as he watched Napoleon don his fencing gear clumsily. Napoleon was unfazed by Louis's insult as he adjusted the mask. After that, stepped onto the designated fencing area and faced Louis. Louis smirked and stepped forward, rolling his shoulders and sweeping his blade twice through the air, a sign the duel was about to begin. Napoleon exclaimed softly beneath his mask, so flashy, he wondered if he could do that, and so repeated the rapier movements he had made. Louis's eyes narrowed in displeasure. "You talk big for someone who's struggling to hold his rapier properly," he scoffed. "I'm Louis de la Rochefoucauld, first son of Count Philippe of Montauban. How about you?" There was a hint of mockery in Louis's tone and his friends started laughing. Possibly because they believed Napoleon didn't have a noble background like Louis. Napoleon ignored their puerile attempt at riling him up and introduced himself according to the customs. "I'm Napoleon Bonaparte. I'll give you the honor of striking first. Come at me, Napoleon," Louis taunted. "You talk big for someone who is nothing but a pretentious brat, Louis. I bet you've never tasted defeat in your entire life. But what if a lowly commoner like me beats you in this duel? Your precious family name and reputation in this school will be nothing but a joke. Do you have the guts to face that kind of shame, or are you just all bark and no bite? Your way of speaking is uncivilized, of course. Would never ever imagine myself losing to the likes of you. You might not know this, but I'm the best at fencing. All the more reason to be more worried, because if I defeat you at your best, then what does that say about you?" Napoleon retorted, a smirk forming beneath his mask. Louis's eyes narrowed in annoyance. "You talk big for someone who's barely holding his rapier properly," he sneered. Napoleon shrugged nonchalantly. "We'll see about that," he said as he took up his stance, his eyes focused on Louis. The two fencers began to circle each other again, the tip of their rapiers clinking as they met. Napoleon watched Louis carefully, waiting for an opening. Moments later, Louis advanced, thrusting the tip of his rapier towards Napoleon's heart, completely abandoning his earlier gracious offer to let Napoleon make the first strike. Napoleon noticed something was off. Louis's movements were sluggish, as if in slow motion. He wondered what was happening and looked around, only to see others moving at the same snail's pace. Could it be that his cheat had been activated? Napoleon took advantage of it and made a quarter turn to the left, letting the blade cut only air. His own rapier swept up, then down in a precise, diagonal arc. But just as it was about to land on Louis's neck, he stopped, letting the situation sink in him. "If this was a real blade, you would have been killed already. I thought that you were good at fencing, but all I see is a brat who doesn't know how to hold a blade properly," Napoleon said, his voice dripping with disdain. "The heck did you say?" Louis swatted Napoleon's blade away and repositioned himself, his face contorted with anger and confusion. What the hell did he just do? His movement was fast and precise, Louis muttered to himself. Napoleon raised his blade. "What's wrong?" Given up already? Louis gritted his teeth, his grip tightening around his rapier. I am not so easily defeated, he said, his voice low and controlled. He lunged forward, his rapier aimed for Napoleon's chest. But Napoleon was ready. He stepped to the side and parried the blow, his own rapier flicking out to strike Louis's arm. Louis winced in pain and pulled back, his expression darkening. You are good, he said through gritted teeth. But I am better. Napoleon chuckled. Is that so? He circled around Louis, watching him carefully. Suddenly, Louis launched a flurry of attacks, his rapier darting forward in a series of quick jabs. But Napoleon was quicker, his rapier deflecting each blow with ease. Too predictable, Napoleon said, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Speed can only get you so far, Louis. You need to start using your head if you want to stand a chance against me. I thought you were better than this, but it turns out you're just another wastrel disappointment. Napoleon deftly dodged Louis's next attack, stepping back and parrying the blow with a flick of his wrist. He countered with a swift thrust, aiming for Louis's chest. Louis managed to block it, but Napoleon followed up with a series of rapid strikes, his rapier moving in a blur. Louis, who just saw such a flawless technique being performed in front of him, froze, and took each hit. He fell to his knees, his rapier slipping from his grasp. He looked up at Napoleon, his eyes filled with disbelief. The crowds meanwhile were stunned at the events unfolding. Napoleon just beat Louis in fencing? Murmurs and chatters erupted among them. I don't understand, he stammered. How can you be so good? But instead of getting an answer, Napoleon simply looked down on him. How does it feel when a mere commoner like me can outmatch a so-called nobleman like you? Napoleon's voice dripped with icy satisfaction as he towered over Louis, who was still on his knees. The onlookers were silenced by the sudden change in the atmosphere, and some could even feel a shiver running down their spine. Louis's face contorted with anger and humiliation, and he balled his fists. He refused to accept the reality of the situation, the fact that he had been beaten so easily by someone of lower social status. But Napoleon wasn't finished. He leaned down, his face inches away from Louis's, and whispered in a cold, menacing tone. You thought you were better than me, didn't you? You looked down on me. And now, as I stand here victorious, you will realize the painful reality that you are nothing but a hollow shell of your privilege. Louis felt a chill go down his spine as he gazed up into Napoleon's eyes, now filled with a cold intensity that made him feel powerless. He realized that he had underestimated Napoleon, both as a fencer and as a person. The onlookers watched in silence as Napoleon stood up, his eyes still locked onto Louis's. He sheathed his rapier and turned away, leaving Louis to pick himself up from the ground and face the shame of his defeat. Wait. We are not finished yet. Louis interrupted, his voice shaking with anger and humiliation. But Napoleon did not even glance back. This infuriated Louis even more and shouted. How dare you turn your back on me? Napoleon stopped in his tracks and slowly turned to face Louis, his piercing gaze locking onto him. Stop it, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. You've already lost. Spare yourself further embarrassment and acknowledge that I am superior to you. No, scratch that. I'm not just superior to you, but to everyone here combined, he declared with a domineering tone. Don't delude yourself into thinking you're better than me. I'm the only student who's achieved a perfect mark. If you can't accept that, you're only demonstrating your own ignorance. Louis's face contorted with a mixture of anger and shame, as he struggled to find the words to respond to Napoleon's taunts. He knew that he had been outmatched in every way and that his pride had been shattered in front of the entire school. But he couldn't let Napoleon's arrogance go unchallenged. You may have won this duel, Louis spat out, his voice shaking with rage, but that doesn't make you better than me. You may have a perfect mark, but that's just a number. In the end, you are just a commoner." Napoleon scoffed, his voice dripping with icy disdain. "You're still holding on to that outdated bigotry, huh?" he sneered. "You're too blinded by your own hubris and privilege to recognize reality when it slaps you in the face. I have wasted too much time talking to you, I'll leave now." Napoleon went back to his dormitory after the fencing battle. Just as he thought, fencing is included in one of the fighting skills that the goddess of fate blessed him. This is useful information, and with that, he knew that he can use other martial arts. Though he still believes in the notion that knowledge without experience is useless, so instead of relying on his cheat, he'll learn on his own. That way, he can feel the satisfaction of truly mastering a skill. Now that the kid has been humbled, he can now study in his school with those spoiled brats leaving him alone. Defeating Louis in the fencing match is a statement that Napoleon was not to be underestimated. At least for now, they'll fear him, and that's probably the best thing that could happen to him. Days turned to months, and months turned to years. The school had been a resounding success for Napoleon, who continued to excel in his studies. Ever since winning the duel, he was never bothered by the spoiled brats of nobility and instead left alone by himself. This was the good situation that he could ever hope for, as he could do his business more easily without having to bother himself with them. But during class, Napoleon would sometimes show off his knowledge learned from every subject. He would participate in recitation in an eloquent manner and even put words into writing when his teacher asked him to write them on a board. His classmates could only gasp at his knowledge and were left to improve their own. As he excelled in his studies, more and more teachers began to take notice of Napoleon's exceptional abilities. They recognized his potential and sought to challenge him with more difficult assignments and projects. Napoleon welcomed these challenges and worked tirelessly to surpass the expectations of his teachers. Despite his academic achievements, Napoleon was still an outsider in the eyes of many of his classmates. He was often the target of their subtle ridicule and scorn, but he remained undeterred, refusing to let the petty insults of others get in his way. He would also write letters to his family in Corsica about his achievements, and they would respond with pride and encouragement. They would even reward him by giving him an additional allowance to spend where he could treat himself. In addition to his academic pursuits, Napoleon was also focused on maintaining his physical health. He was aware of the historical record indicating that Napoleon, whom he had become in this world, had been of average height for his time. However, he believed that he could alter his own height by changing his diet. To that end, he incorporated regular milk consumption into his routine, as he had learned it could promote bone growth. He also made a point to include plenty of protein-rich foods like meat and fish in his diet to support his muscle development. Additionally, he recognized the importance of eating fruits and vegetables, as they provided essential vitamins and minerals crucial for maintaining good health. But Napoleon's commitment to physical health didn't stop at his diet. He was also an avid exerciser, making time for daily runs around the Brienne-le-Château and bodyweight exercises like push-ups and sit-ups in his room. He would wake up early in the morning to do a quick routine and then would allow his body 2 to 3 days of rest to recover after intense workouts. After adopting that disciplined lifestyle, Napoleon soon began to witness remarkable changes in his physique. His once lean and average frame transformed into a lean, toned, and muscular body, complete with the strength and endurance that he had always wanted. The contours of his muscles were visible under his skin, a testament to his hard work and dedication. He no longer struggled to keep up with the physical demands of his daily life, and instead found himself thriving in every task that he undertook. So far, things had progressed the way history progressed in his previous world. This cemented the fact that he hadn't reincarnated into another world as a parallel Napoleon, but rather had been transported back in time. At least that was the case when he encountered an aberration. The year was 1781, and it was during his semestral break. He was in his dorm at that time, drawing up schematics and diagrams for every significant invention made during the Industrial Revolution. There was a knock on the door, causing him to shift his attention from the paper he was working on. Napoleon stood up and opened the door, revealing a woman who is about 2 inches shorter than him and the same age as him. She was stunningly beautiful, with delicate features and a slender frame. Her strawberry blonde hair was tied in a French braid with a blue ribbon, cascading down her back in waves. But what caught Napoleon's attention the most was her striking blue, a color that was both mesmerizing and rare. "Can I help you?" Napoleon asked, trying to hide his surprise at the unexpected visitor. The woman smiled at him and began. "Delighted to meet you, master," she said with a curtsy. "Hopefully it is not too forward of me to greet you in such a manner. I'm Ciela, your most loyal personal maid that you'll ever have the pleasure of meeting." Her tone was teasing, and her smile hinted at a mischievous streak. Napoleon cringed a little and tilted his head to the side, confused. I think you have mistaken me for someone. I don't have a maid. Perhaps if you could give me the name of your master, I would be happy to assist you in telling you where his dorm room is." Ciela shook her head. "No, you are my master. You are Napoleon Bonaparte. Your parents hired me to become your maid. I have a letter here from your parents that can explain everything." Ciela took out a letter from her basket and handed it over to Napoleon. He quickly scanned through it, confirming that indeed, his parents had hired a personal maid for him. But why? He was doing fine on his own and he doesn't need a maid. What's more, hiring one would be a waste of money. What are they thinking? A thought came to mind in the middle of his contemplation. Did Napoleon Bonaparte's family hire a personal maid for Napoleon? He searched for that information through the user interface and found none. So does this mean that this girl could be an aberration of some sort? A sign that this world is indeed a parallel and not similar to his previous world? Well, maybe Napoleon and other historians didn't bother writing about the existence of this girl, but that couldn't be the case, as Napoleon Bonaparte is an important figure of history. They would write anything about the person that stood and worked next to him, including a personal maid. But seeing that there is none in history, it is safe to assume that this world is indeed a parallel world. Still, he couldn't understand why his parents would hire a personal maid in the first place. Nevertheless, he has to take care of this woman. Ciela, was it? Well, I have confirmed that you are indeed hired by my parents, but I didn't ask for one. Ciela didn't reply and instead only looked at him, smiling warmly. Ciela, I am asking if you can return some other day once my parents and I have discussed this matter, Napoleon said, trying to be polite. That won't be possible, master, as I have no place to go back to and have no money for food and lodging, Ciela interrupted, still maintaining her posture. I would be eternally grateful if you could let me stay and serve you as your maid. I promise to work hard and be loyal to you, just as your parents have instructed me to. This is going to be troublesome, Napoleon muttered under his breath. Suddenly, Ciela grabbed his hand and enveloped it with both of hers. Napoleon felt a jolt of surprise at the sudden physical contact. He pulled his hand back slightly, but Ciela's grip was firm. Her hands were warm and soft, and he couldn't help but notice the faint scent of lavender emanating from her. Please, master, she pleaded, looking up at him with big, pleading eyes. I have nowhere else to go. I will work hard and make sure that I don't become a burden to you. Just give me a chance to prove my worth. What the heck is this girl? She is so persistent and overly forward, Napoleon thought. But still, her eyes said it all, that if he were to send her away, she would be stranded and homeless. He doesn't want to be the cause of something that could happen to her. Plus, he couldn't deny the fact that having a personal maid would be convenient, even if he didn't necessarily need one. Fine, he said finally, relenting. You can stay for now. I'm coming in, Ciela trilled, her voice carrying a tune that filled the small space. With a gracious step, Napoleon shifted to the side and ushered her in. Ciella's curious gaze scanned the humble abode, eagerly taking in every detail. Her eyes darted up to the ceiling, down to the floor, left to the walls, and right to the furnishings, as if committing each inch to memory. In front of her stood Napoleon's dorm room, a cozy yet Spartan space that spoke to the young scholar's simple tastes. The twin-sized bed was neatly made, its plain white sheets tucked in with precision. A small armoire, barely large enough for a handful of garments, sat in one corner, its carved doors a testament to the artistry of the era. The writing desk, occupying another nook, was cluttered with papers and books, each bearing the mark of Napoleon's studious nature. Ciella took in the room's atmosphere, feeling as if she had been transported to another time. The warm glow of candlelight flickered across the walls, casting shadows that danced in the dimly lit space. The scent of ink and parchment filled the air, lending a scholarly ambience to the room. "You got a small yet pleasant room here, master," Ciella said as she turned around and faced Napoleon. "Are you perhaps surprised about my tidiness?" Napoleon grinned. "Well, too bad for you. Seeing that my room is clean means that there is no reason for me to actually hire a maid. I'm actually starting to think how necessary you are." "You're mean, master," Ciella pouted. "A maid is not only limited to cleaning the abode of its master but to serve as a companion and confidant as well. And don't forget, I also make excellent tea," she added with a playful wink. "As if I needed tea," Napoleon said to himself. "I'm more like a coffee type of person." "Are you going to stay here?" Napoleon asked. "You see, my dormitory is quite small and us sharing a bed is out of the question." "Don't worry, master. I can sleep on the floor." Ciella's voice trailed off as she noticed the expression on Napoleon's face. He seemed hesitant, perhaps even uncomfortable at the idea of her sleeping on the floor. "Master, it was just a joke," she said, quickly realizing her mistake. "I didn't mean to make you feel uneasy. One of my primary jobs as your personal maid is to not make you feel uncomfortable, and I have failed on it. Please punish me as you see fit." Napoleon shook his hand dismissively. No, I'm not uncomfortable and you are clearly misunderstanding. I would actually let you sleep on my bed and I will sleep on the floor." Ciella's eyes widened in surprise. "Master, that's not necessary. You don't have to sleep on the floor just because I'm here. I can manage on my own, I promise." Napoleon shook his head. "Nonsense, Ciella. I insist. It wouldn't be proper for me to let a lady sleep on the floor while I take the bed. Besides, I don't mind sleeping on the floor. I'm used to it." Ciella smiled, touched by Napoleon's chivalrous gesture. "Thank you, master. You're too kind." "No big deal, it's only temporary anyways." "Temporary?" "Yes, until I get in touch with my parents asking them about why they would hire you to be my personal maid, you are allowed to stay here." "Personally, I don't need a maid, it's an unnecessary expense. It's already a good thing that I helped them save a lot of money because of the scholarship I got in this school, but you, well, I don't know." Ciella's enthusiastic expression faltered, and she lowered her gaze. "Don't take it personally, Ciella," Napoleon continued, noticing her sudden change in demeanor. "I just don't understand why my parents would hire a personal maid for me. Then, until you get in touch with your family, I'm allowed to do my duties, right?" Ciella asked. "Well, you can do the cleaning, but that's really all there is to be done. I eat in the cafeteria so you won't have to cook for me, and I can pretty much do things alone." "No, you are wrong, master," Ciella interrupted. "Besides what you have mentioned, there are other avenues where I can serve you as your personal maid. One of which is being a friend." Upon saying that, she made a peace sign and winked. Napoleon was taken aback by the way Ciela is expressing herself. It's almost like she's out of this world. Her innocent and bubbly nature is a deep contrast to that of the woman of this era, which is mostly reserved and formal. But Napoleon found himself drawn to Ciela's refreshing energy and felt a sudden urge to open up to her. Well, I suppose that you can add that to your role. A friend of mine. However, I must warn you, I'm not very popular in this school. In fact, everybody hates me, but don't mistake it for me being all sad and depressed about it. I'm not just some other kid who yearns for attention. I understand, Master, Ciela replied with a soft smile. Whatever the others think of you, for me, Master is more than just a label. You're a person with feelings, dreams, and goals, and I'm here to support you in any way I can. So, if you ever need someone to talk to or just someone to listen to, I'm here for you. This is going to be a pain in the ass, Napoleon thought to himself again. The devotion of this maid that he just met is just baffling to him. He couldn't understand why someone would go out of their way to support him, especially when he didn't ask for it. But there was something about Ciela that he found comforting, something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Napoleon simply nodded. Anyway, I have to get back to work. Before you arrived, I was busy working on something. The semester is going to start in a week and I have been doing advanced reading. Very well, Master. If you need anything from me, be whatever it is, just ask. Napoleon took his seat and began continuing where he left off. The advanced reading was a lie. What he was actually doing was him resuming writing paper for the principles of thermodynamics that will serve as a foundation for his future invention. For Napoleon, it's best that the people must have a concept of an event in order for it to be accepted widely, especially in the era where everyone seemed so conservative and traditional. Once he is done with that, he will present it to the French Academy of Sciences or University of Paris, where he can find a wealthy patron, who would potentially fund his research, allowing him to turn the drawing to life. Not only that, but he also planned to disprove an obsolete scientific theory about here. It's called a caloric theory, which states that heat is a substance called caloric that flows from hotter bodies to cooler ones. Napoleon believed that this theory was fundamentally flawed, as heat is a form of energy, not a substance. What's more, it was Antoine Lavoisier who came up with it. He is popular and considered to be one of the smartest men of the time, discovering the element oxygen and silicon. Disproving his theory all the while proving his own would definitely get him some connection he needs to the scientific community of France. But, he can't write down a single word as Ciela is standing behind him, watching him intently. However, before he could voice out his concern, Ciela spoke. Master, I can't help but adore your drawing. It looked very technical, like it was drawn by an engineer. Do you perhaps want to become one after you graduate? No, I am pursuing a military career, Ciela. You can think of this thing as a hobby of mine. What is it then? May I ask? Napoleon hummed, pondering whether telling her what he has been up to is worth it. But then again, he felt like he could trust Ciela with this information. It's not like she is going to understand it anyway. It's a paper about thermodynamics. I plan to present it to the French Academy of Sciences or the University of Paris once the time is right, he said finally. Thermodynamics, you say? Ciela tilted her head to the side, her finger on her lips, questioning Napoleon further. What is it? As expected, she would ask that. I'll explain to you when the time is right. For now, be silent and let me do my work, okay? Like, you can lay on the bed while I work here. As you wish, my master, Ciela curtsied before laying down on Napoleon's bed. Napoleon heard her sniffing his bed sheet and pillow. So this is what master smells like. It smells manly and good. Ciela softly chuckled to herself. Napoleon ran a hand over his face and sighed. She's not right on the head. Master. Master. It's already morning, wake up. You said you are going somewhere important today. Napoleon could feel his cheek getting poked by Ciella's finger, causing him to arouse from his sleep. He groaned and opened his eyes to the sight of his faithful servant, Ciella, standing over him with a wide smile on her face. Ciella beamed a smile of admiration at her master and helped him get up. Napoleon rubbed his eyes, trying to clear his head and focus on the task at hand. He took a deep breath and looked around the room, taking in the familiar sights and sounds that had become a part of his daily routine. Master, I already cooked you breakfast and prepared your bath. Just as you told me yesterday, the headmaster has given me permission to cook food for you, Ciella said, gesturing towards a small table in the corner of the room. Is that so? Napoleon stood and stretched his arms. Thank you, Ciella. That was very kind of you. Oh master, it is one of the primary tasks as your personal maid to cook your food. There's no need to thank me, Ciella replied, her eyes shining with adoration for her master. Ever since Ciella arrived in his dormitory yesterday, there's not been a time where she would praise and reiterate her devotion to Napoleon, which made him a little uncomfortable at times. He was not used to having a personal maid, let alone someone who was so devoted to him. But he couldn't deny that her presence made his life a bit more comforting. As he sat down to eat his breakfast, Napoleon thought about the important agenda he had today. First, before the semester starts in a week, he would meet with a certain individual that would allow his thesis about thermodynamics to be recognized by the great intellectuals in Paris. Secondly is to hand over a private correspondence to the La Poste Royale, containing a message to his family asking why they would hire a personal maid for him. Ciella watched him eat with a small smile on her face and occasionally refilled his teacup. When Napoleon finished, he stood up, took a bath, and got dressed. Ciella walked forward with his jacket and walked behind him. Ciella, I can dress. No, master, I insist. This is one of my responsibilities as your personal maid, and I take it very seriously. Please allow me to assist you, Ciella said with a gentle smile as she helped him put on his jacket. Napoleon sighed and nodded, realizing that there was no point in talking to a persistent girl like her. Ciella skillfully buttoned his jacket while gazing up at Napoleon with a smile. She was cute up close if he were to admit it, with her bright eyes and rosy cheeks. As they made their way outside, Ciella walked close to him, holding an umbrella to shield him from the light drizzle of rain. The school grounds were relatively empty, with only a few people walking about. As they arrived at the courtyard of the school, Napoleon saw the man he asked to meet. It was the person whom he had defeated in a fencing duel, Louis. He was sitting inside the gazebo, with his attendants composing butlers, maids, and other servants who were busily attending to him. Must feel good to be born into a wealthy family. He walked towards the gazebo with Ciella following closely behind him. As they approached, Louis looked up and he noticed their presence. Napoleon. Louis said softly, there was a lace of apprehension tinged in his voice. Bonjour Louis, I'm glad that you came despite our not-so-close relationship, Napoleon said, entering the gazebo. Well, I had to come. You left me no choice, Louis replied, his tone curt. After getting humbled by Napoleon, Louis's impression of Napoleon changed bit by bit. At first, he was bitter, of course, as a nobility who carried himself with great pride. Losing to a commoner like Napoleon was like a stain on his reputation. So he was determined to get revenge on him, not on fencing, but on other things like academics. He tried competing with him in all subjects but failed utterly, as Napoleon always aced his exam with ease, impressing the teachers and leaving him in the dust. With time, Louis started to appreciate Napoleon's intelligence and began to respect him. Napoleon sat down opposite Louis and his attendants scurried to bring him a cup of tea. Ciella stood behind Napoleon. Who is that girl? Louis asked. Is she your attendant? I don't expect you to have one. Well, that is a bit complicated, Napoleon chuckled. You see, my parents hired one for me, so there she is. Her name is Ciela, if you are curious. Ciela lifted the side of her hem and curtsied politely. Bonjour, je m'appelle Ciela. Je suis la femme de chambre personnelle de Napoleon, she introduced herself in a soft, melodic voice. Louis raised an eyebrow in surprise. A personal maid? That's a rather unusual arrangement for someone of your social standing, Napoleon. Napoleon shrugged nonchalantly. I don't know what to say, so can we move forward with our meeting? What do you want, Napoleon? Louis asked. I was hoping that you know how a person can present their thesis in the University of Paris or the French Academy of Sciences. I'm sure as someone from your social standing, you would know the process. After all, you want to become a scholar, right? Louis's brows furrowed. You have a thesis? What is it about? It's about the science of heat, disproving the idea of the famous caloric theory by Antoine Lavoisier. Ah, that scientific theory, huh? I heard about it and it seems very interesting. But you see, Napoleon, the caloric theory is the best one there is. Why would you want to disprove it? Louis asked with a hint of skepticism. Napoleon leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Because I have evidence that contradicts the caloric theory. Though I haven't experimented with it yet, I'm confident. My theory is that heat is not a fluid, as Lavoisier suggested, but rather a form of motion. So you wrote a thesis without experimenting on your hypothesis? Louis suppressed his grin. Napoleon may excel academically, but he still has a lot to learn about scientific research and methodology. Napoleon chuckled. I know, that's why there is another thing I want to ask you aside from it. I want you to loan me some money so I can build a contraption that would confirm my hypothesis. I'm talking about 200 livres. Louis leaned back, looking at Napoleon with a mix of amusement and surprise. 200 livres? That's quite a sum for an untested theory. And what makes you think I would lend you that kind of money? Napoleon leaned back as well, his expression confident. Because I know you are a man of great wealth and influence. And I also know that you are interested in the sciences, Louis. Think of it as an investment in the pursuit of knowledge. He looked down and saw a book on the table. Is that Bernoulli's differential equation book? I happen to know a great deal about that subject. Want me to teach you? Louis's eyes widened a bit and scoffed. You can't possibly know this, Napoleon. Try me, Napoleon challenged. Louis hummed. If you answer this question, I'll let you borrow 200 livres. Not only that, I'll speak with my father, who has an associate in the University of Paris and the French Academy of Sciences. But if you answer it wrong, you know what happens. Napoleon nodded, accepting the challenge. Louis picked up the book and opened it. He flipped through the pages, looking for the hardest examples. After a few moments, Louis found what he was looking for and pointed to a particularly complex equation. Can you solve this one? dy/dx plus 2y/x equals x superscript 2y superscript 2 sin x. Napoleon takes a moment to examine the equation before him, analyzing each term. He recognizes that this is a first-order linear ordinary differential equation of the form dy/dx plus p, x, y equals q, x, y caret n, where n equals 2, p, x, equals 2/x and q, x, equals x squared sin, x. This question takes him back to his college days when he was in his original world. Differential equations were one of his best subjects, and to think that Louis would consider this a hard question baffled him. This is simple differentiation. He got to work, writing down his solution and boxing his final answer. Napoleon solved it within 3 minutes, and Louis was dumbfounded at how fast he was able to solve it. He compared Napoleon's solution to the book. Although the steps were a bit different, they arrived at the same answer. How? Louis asked, his eyes wide as he looked at Napoleon with disbelief. Well, I told you before, I'm just good, Napoleon grinned, with no need to consult with his cheat blessings. So? Do we have a deal or not? Louis sighed. Fine, you have my word, Napoleon. But make sure to teach me your method. Yours is very straightforward and seems easy to understand compared to this book. Also, we can only do it in my dorm room. I don't want anyone seeing me lumping with you. No problem, Napoleon said, sipping his tea. As Napoleon was deep in thought, Ciela, his faithful assistant, barged in unannounced with a tray of breakfast delicacies. The sudden entrance caused him to jump in surprise, nearly spilling ink all over his desk. Ciela, what the, please knock before entering. I nearly spilled the ink that could have ruined a week's worth of work, Napoleon said in a stern but gentle tone. I apologize, master, Ciela replied, with a grin on her face. I couldn't contain my excitement to see you again. Napoleon let out a small chuckle. You left just a few minutes ago, Ciela. What could possibly have changed in that short amount of time? Ciela's face lit up with delight. Nothing has changed, master. I am simply overjoyed to serve you again. Napoleon rolled his eyes playfully. Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Ciela. Please place my breakfast on the table, and I'll enjoy it shortly. Understood, Ciela giddily heads toward the table while humming a sing-song tune. As Ciela placed the tray on the table, Napoleon couldn't help but smile at her infectious energy. She had been his personal assistant for a week now and her existence brought life to his otherwise dull dormitory. He took a moment to admire the spread before him. Freshly brewed coffee, croissants with homemade jam, and a colorful fruit salad were just some of the items on the tray. The aroma of the coffee wafted through the air, making his stomach grumble. Thank you, Ciela. It looks delicious, he said, taking a sip of the hot coffee. Ciela beamed with satisfaction, happy to see her master enjoying his breakfast. Is there anything else you need, master? Please, don't hesitate to ask. As your faithful maid, I shall deliver everything to you while you focus on your work. Oh? How about the new uniform that is to be delivered today? Napoleon asked. I think they are available now in the uniform store. Do you want me to get it for you? Yes, because there are only 4 hours left before my first subject starts, so that would be great, Ciela. Thank you, Napoleon said, grateful for her promptness. Ciela nodded and quickly left the room to retrieve his uniform, giving him a much-needed time of silence to focus on his work. Speaking of Ciela, she has been extraordinary in her work. She gets things done flawlessly, and even without him giving a word, she knows exactly what to do. Napoleon couldn't help but wonder about her identity. He didn't ask her anything personal. Perhaps, it slipped his mind, but the way she behaved truly is different from how the woman in this era behaved. Napoleon searched through hundreds of catalogs, from Napoleon's journal to his autobiography and diaries, but there wasn't a mention of Napoleon having a personal maid. She is a clear sign that this is not the same world as him. Her name was Ciela, a somewhat synonymous name to the goddess who gave him a second chance in life, Ciel. Could it be? No, that couldn't possibly be the case. There's no way a goddess herself would tread upon the mortal world and accompany him. That's just too far. Well, maybe if she returned, Napoleon could start asking her questions. Speaking of the devil, Ciela arrived with a basket. Inside it was probably his uniform. Master. I have arrived. Yeah, I can see that, Napoleon said simply. Ciela, it's been a week since you started working for me, and I believe as your employer, I have the right to know about you, like you know where you initially lived and where's your family or something like that. When Napoleon brought that question up, Ciela's cheerful face suddenly fell. She stood still for a moment before answering. What do you want to know from me, master? Ciela said in a soft voice. Napoleon's brows creased. Sorry, is asking about your history made you feel uncomfortable? Ciela shook her head. No, master. She made a cheek slap as if trying to snap out of her thoughts. Her somber expression slowly faded and her usual smile returned. Sorry about that, master, so about me. I was born in Marseille without having to know my parents and have lived in an orphanage for most of my life. Having not spoken for another second, Napoleon tilted his head to the side. That's it? Master, though I assure you that I will do anything that you order, asking about my history is unfortunately an order that I won't be able to obey, Ciela said, her voice firm yet respectful. Is that so? Well, you want to keep your identity a secret, huh? Then how did my parents meet you and have you worked as my personal maid? Well, I can't tell you that either, Ciela said. Napoleon sighed. If she doesn't want to tell him, then he can ask his parents about it. He doesn't want to overly push someone into an uncomfortable situation, so he gave up on the idea of learning about her identity, for now. If you really don't want to tell me, then so be it. Though I would find it preferable to work with someone I knew. We all have secrets to hide, so I understand and respect your decision, Ciela. Ciela nodded, relieved that Napoleon understood. Thank you, master. I won't disappoint you. Napoleon smiled. I have no doubt about that, Ciela. Now, let's try this new uniform. With a bright smile, she presented the uniform to him. As she pulled it out of the basket, he donned it and checked his reflection in the mirror. Napoleon couldn't help but admire the elegance of its design. The dark blue coat was the centerpiece of the uniform, its brass buttons gleaming in the light. Its military style was evident in the high collar and the tails that swept behind him as he swayed side to side. The white waistcoat added a touch of refinement, its gold or silver embroidery glinting in the candlelight. Then there is breeches, made of gray wool. The embroidery on the waistcoat and breeches was a sign of the school's prestige, a symbol of the honor that came with wearing such a uniform. Underneath the coat was a white linen shirt with a high collar, a nod to the formality of the time. The cravat added an extra touch of sophistication, while the leather shoes completed the look. The tricorn hat, with its cockade in the school's colors, was the final touch, a symbol of his membership in this distinguished institution. He stood tall, admiring himself in the mirror. He looked like the military figures that he used to see in historical paintings. Shit, the fashion style of this era is sophisticated. You look very handsome, master. Ciela placed a hand over her mouth as she gazed at Napoleon in awe. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw him dressed in the school uniform. She had always thought of him as a handsome man, but in the uniform, he looked like a prince. Napoleon chuckled at Ciela's reaction, amused by her sudden change in demeanor. You are really good at flattering me, don't you? Ciela blushed, feeling embarrassed by her own reaction. I am sorry, master. I couldn't help myself. You really do look handsome in that uniform. Napoleon laughed, enjoying the way Ciela's cheeks turned a rosy shade of pink. It's quite all right, Ciela. I appreciate the compliment. He turned to the side, admiring himself in the mirror once more. I don't feel like removing it, so I'm going to continue my work wearing this. I'm going to wear it anyway later, so why the hassle? The first day of class has arrived and the students from all noble backgrounds arrived in their respective classrooms. Napoleon, as usual, took his seat at the end by the window. He glanced around his surroundings and noticed that his classmates looked older than him. Well, not that it surprised him because it was expected. 2 months ago, prior to the semester break, the headmaster summoned him to his office and informed him that he could skip to 10th grade, the last grade of high school. The reason for this was quite simple. The test that Napoleon took every year was topped by him, even advanced subjects that are not yet taught in his past school grades were also aced by him. This led to the decision of the board of the school that Napoleon is simply too good for his current grade level. This caused another aberration in history. Seeing that Napoleon from his original world doesn't skip grades means history is already altered. History from his system is useless now and can only be used as a reference. He is on his own, writing his own fate in a new timeline. Napoleon was aware of the weight of his situation. He knew that he was now on a path that was different from what was expected of him, but he was determined to make the most of it. "Oh, so you are the kid who skipped grades, huh?" said a man standing before him. Napoleon raised his head to see who was addressing him. It was a tall and well-built man, probably in his mid-30s, with a stern expression on his face. "I have heard from my fellow teachers that there wasn't a subject that you couldn't excel in," the man continued. "I must admit, I am quite intrigued to see what you are capable of." Napoleon's curiosity was piqued as he tried to discern the man's identity. He certainly looked like someone of importance, perhaps a high-ranking military official or even a government representative. "May I ask who you are, sir?" Napoleon inquired, his gaze fixed on the man. The man's stern expression softened into a slight smile. "Apologies for not introducing myself earlier. My name is General François de Villeneuve, and I oversee the military education program in this institution." Napoleon's eyes widened. General de Villeneuve was renowned for his expertise in warfare and had commanded numerous battles in the past. To have him as an instructor was an immense honor. "I've been keeping an eye on your progress, Napoleon," the general continued. "Your skills and potential have not gone unnoticed. I believe you have the makings of a great military leader." "I am humbled by your words, General de Villeneuve," Napoleon replied, his tone respectful. "But if I may share something, acing the exams doesn't necessarily mean that I am already a great military leader. It merely reflects my aptitude for the theoretical aspects of warfare. Practical experience and leadership are equally vital, if not more so." General de Villeneuve nodded, impressed by Napoleon's insightful response. "You're absolutely right, Napoleon. The true test of a leader lies not only in their knowledge but in their ability to apply that knowledge on the battlefield, to lead and inspire others to achieve victory. It requires courage, adaptability, and strategic thinking in the face of uncertainty." Napoleon listened attentively, absorbing every word the general spoke. He understood that his journey was far from over and that he had much to learn beyond the confines of the classroom. "I want to learn, sir," Napoleon said earnestly. "I want to experience firsthand the realities of war, to understand the challenges faced by commanders and soldiers alike. How can I become a leader if I have not tested my mettle in the crucible of battle?" General de Villeneuve regarded Napoleon with a mixture of admiration and caution. He recognized the young student's thirst for knowledge and passion for the military arts, but he also understood the risks involved in exposing a student to the dangers of war. "Napoleon, war is a harsh and unforgiving arena," the general said, his voice filled with a somber tone. "It is not something to be taken lightly. Lives are at stake, and the consequences of failure can be devastating. It is not a path to be pursued without careful consideration. But I have already committed myself, General. I want to serve my country and His Majesty." General de Villeneuve paused for a moment, contemplating Napoleon's conviction. Finally, he spoke. "Very well, if you pass my subject, I'll give you a personal recommendation to École Militaire where you can further your military education and training." Napoleon's eyes widened. That was it. École Militaire was an institution known for producing some of the finest military leaders in France. It was also in that institution where the man he aspired to be graduated. "Thank you, sir," Napoleon said, his voice filled with gratitude. Meanwhile, as the two spoke, Napoleon's classmates looked at him with a sneer and envy. Hey, isn't that the Corsican kid who attracted the attention of all teachers? Yeah, according to the stories, there's not an exam that he didn't ace. The other students continued to gossip and whisper amongst themselves, casting jealous glances at Napoleon. But he paid them no mind, he was used to receiving comments from privileged brats. Okay, we will begin our class in military science. General Villeneuve clapped his hand, interrupting the murmurs of the students. They all took their seats and opened their notebooks. The class delved into the principles of military strategy, tactics, and logistics. The general led the discussion, sharing his experiences and insights from his years of service in the army. Napoleon listened intently, absorbing every word and taking meticulous notes in his notebook. He also delved into how the military functions, the ranks, and the formations. He also learned about the standard rifle used by the army. As expected, this world's firearms are primitive compared to modern standards. The Charleville musket, just like any musket from other countries, suffered from several issues that affected its effectiveness in battle. For one, its accuracy was poor, with most soldiers unable to hit a target at more than 50 yards. The musket also had a slow rate of fire, with soldiers only able to fire 2 to 3 rounds per minute. In addition, the musket's long and heavy design made it difficult to carry for long distances, and its smoothbore barrel meant that the bullet could not be spun to increase its accuracy. To make matters worse, the musket was also prone to misfires and malfunctions, which could be disastrous in the heat of battle. Napoleon recognized the limitations of the musket but also understood that it was the primary weapon used by the army at the time. He made a mental note to study the weapon in greater detail, hoping to find ways to improve its design and effectiveness. As the class continued, General de Villeneuve discussed the importance of discipline and training in the military. He stressed the need for soldiers to follow orders without question and for officers to lead by example and instill a sense of pride and loyalty in their troops. Despite General de Villeneuve's enthusiasm for teaching his students, he couldn't help but notice that some of them were becoming restless. They whispered to each other and passed notes, clearly losing interest in the lecture. However, before he could chide them for their behavior, the timepiece he had placed on the table indicated that the class had just ended. Okay, there will be an assessment tomorrow about the topics we have discussed today, General de Villeneuve announced to the class. Be sure to review your notes and pay attention to the details. Napoleon packed up his notebook and quill and made his way out of the classroom. He hurriedly ran along the hallway and to the courtyard. There he saw Louis, alone in the gazebo. He quickly made his way towards the gazebo and Louis pulled out an envelope. I already talked to my father about your thesis presentation to the universities that you mentioned. He said that they are willing to let you submit your paper for review, but you have to make sure it's polished and well written, Louis said as he handed the envelope to Napoleon. In that envelope is a check for 200 livres for whatever contraption you are going to build to prove your hypothesis. Make sure you pay your debts when due. Thank you, Louis. Napoleon said. Louis crossed his arms and averted his face. Don't misunderstand me, Napoleon. I'm not doing this for you, I'm doing this to gauge your capabilities. You may have aced our exams, but it's different when it comes to formal papers. Napoleon nodded, understanding Louis's motivations. He knew that Louis was a competitive person, and he respected that. He was also grateful for the financial assistance that would help him buy the materials he needed to make the machine. I understand, Louis. And I appreciate your help, Napoleon said. Get out of my sight before anyone sees me talking to you. Good afternoon, master. How was your first day of school? Ciela warmly greeted Napoleon, who was standing before her, and as always, wearing that vibrant smile that seemed to have a calming and rejuvenating effect on him. It's always the same, Napoleon replied as he entered the room, glancing around and taking notice of the clean and organized space. Ciela chuckled softly. Well, I'm glad that at least your day went smoothly. would you like me to prepare some snacks and tea for you? That would be lovely, thank you, Napoleon replied, taking a seat on the couch. As Ciela busied herself with preparing the tea, Napoleon pondered about preparation for his thesis proposal. The 200 livres that Louis loaned to him was a huge help, and now he only has to use it. Nicolas Leonard Sutty Carnot hypothesized that heat could be converted into work in a reversible process and that the greater the temperature difference between two systems, the greater the potential for work. This idea paved the way for the establishment of the second law of thermodynamics by Lord Kelvin and Clausius, which stated that heat could not be converted into work without a net loss of energy. Joules was also integral to the advancement of the scientific theory of heat. He collaborated with Lord Kelvin and conducted an experiment at the brewery of John Edward Calley, in which they measured the amount of mechanical work required to turn a paddle in a tank of water and the resulting temperature increase of the water. They found that the amount of work done was proportional to the temperature increase, and from this, they concluded that heat is a form of energy. This experiment became known as the Joule-Thomson experiment, and it was a significant contribution to the development of the concept of energy conservation, which is the first law of thermodynamics. Meaning Napoleon can introduce two laws of thermodynamics in one single thesis. By combining Carnot's theoretical understanding with Joule's experimental evidence, he could provide a comprehensive overview of the laws of thermodynamics and their implications for various fields of study. As for the experiment to prove it, he could conduct the same experiment that Lord Kelvin and Joule had conducted, but with some modifications. He could use a more advanced setup and instruments to obtain more accurate results. Moreover, he could also explore the practical applications of these laws in areas such as engineering, physics, chemistry, and even biology. As he was lost in thought, mumbling words, Ciela couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for Napoleon. He was always liked when engrossed in certain topics, most often when working and studying. She loved observing and staring at Napoleon, who seemed so focused and passionate about his work. "Master, your snack and tea are ready," Ciela said, interrupting Napoleon's thoughts and bringing him back to reality. Napoleon snapped out of his train of thought and glanced at Ciela, who was carrying a tray with a pot of steaming tea and a plate of delicious-looking pastries. "Thank you, Ciela," Napoleon said with a smile as he reached for a pastry. Ciela sat down next to Napoleon on the couch, watching him eat and sipping on her own cup of tea. Napoleon moaned softly. "This cookie is good. Did you make it yourself?" "Yes, I did," Ciela replied with a hint of pride in her voice. "I'm glad that you liked it. It makes my heart happy to see you enjoying my baking." As Napoleon continued eating the confectionaries and sipping the tea, Ciela suddenly leaned forward and reached over to the buttons of his uniform. "Wah! What are you doing?" "Master, allow me to personally remove your uniform," Ciela said as she continued unbuttoning his uniform and removing it from him. He could feel her hands gently sliding the fabric off his shoulders, revealing the white undershirt beneath. After that, she proceeded to remove his leather shoes and socks. Napoleon felt a wave of heat rise to his cheeks as Ciela undressed him, her hands moving with practiced ease. Normally, Ciela would do something surprising that would always catch him off guard. Though this is just a perk of having a personal maid. Once his shoes and socks were off, Ciela stood up and walked over to a nearby cabinet, retrieving a fresh set of clothes for Napoleon. She handed them to him and then proceeded to gather up his uniform and other items, placing them neatly in a pile on the floor. "You can take care of the rest, master, or perhaps you want me to assist you further?" Ciela asked, looking at Napoleon with a coy smile. "This girl is sus." He screamed inwardly, there's no way a 13-year-old girl like him can do such flirtatious remarks. Like, where the hell did she learn it anyway? She always acts out of her age. I better watch her carefully here. Or perhaps, he can use her. That's right, Ciela being his personal maid presented a new opportunity for him, a partner. In the future, he would conduct a lot of experiments that he couldn't do alone. Having her as an assistant would prove to be beneficial for him in the long run. Ciela, I have observed that you are a capable lady, you are smart, talented, and hardworking. So, I have a proposition for you. Proposition? Ciela repeated, wondering what Napoleon had to offer her. Ciela, why don't you become my partner? And by that, I mean you are going to help me out with everything. Partner, you say, master, are you proposing to me? Ciela squealed. Napoleon was taken aback by Ciela's response. No, 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 he said quickly. I mean partner in the sense of an assistant. You know, like a colleague. Ciela looked crestfallen for a moment before her face lit up again. Oh, I understand now, master. Of course, I would be honored to be your partner. Napoleon let out a sigh of relief. He didn't want Ciela to get the wrong idea about their relationship. He needed her as a partner, not a romantic interest. Excellent, he said with a smile. Now that you have agreed, I will have to teach you everything I know, from science, to military tactics, and martial arts. Starting tomorrow, you will follow my morning routine and spend time studying with me. What Napoleon wanted really is a right hand, someone that is devoutly loyal to him and easy to control. Ciela seemed to fit the bill, and it would be a waste if she is not used to her potential. But what about the deal we made last week, that I can only stay here until? Ah, that. Forget about that, Napoleon cut her off. I think having you with me is beneficial in the long run, so when the letter arrives from Corsica, I will write another letter telling my parents that I have changed my mind and have accepted you fully, Napoleon said and continued. So, are you up to the task? Ciela, are you ready to become my right hand? Yes, master, Ciela said reverently as she bowed her head. Very well, this is going to be exhilarating. Ever since that agreement was made, Napoleon and Ciela conducted their daily regimen. She joined Napoleon on his run around the school grounds, teaching her the basics of martial arts, and taking his lesson after his class. To see if there was any improvement in Ciela, Napoleon would put her skill to a test, such as having her take an assessment test and have her fight him in a bout. Of course, Ciela would be defeated in a fight, but in the test, she was showing remarkable progress. As the weeks went by, Ciela's physical and mental prowess improved, and she was becoming more confident in her abilities. One day, while on their morning run, Ciela brought up something unexpected. Master, I want you to fight me seriously in our next sparring session. You want to do what? Napoleon glanced at her briefly before turning towards the front. I know that I'm always defeated in our sparring sessions and you are always holding back. If I want to truly gauge what I have learned the last few weeks, you must fight me seriously. Napoleon understood Ciela's request. He knew that she was ready to take on a bigger challenge and that it was time to push her limits. He nodded in agreement. All right, Ciela. I'll fight you seriously in our next sparring session, he said. Ciela smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She knew that it would be a tough fight, but she was determined to give it her all. Over the next few days, Napoleon and Ciela continued their training as usual. But there was a sense of anticipation in the air, and both of them were preparing for the upcoming sparring session. Finally, the day arrived. Napoleon and Ciela were in the courtyard, ready to face each other in a serious bout. Napoleon and Ciela stepped into the gym, their eyes locked in a fierce determination. They had been training for weeks, and both knew that this was the moment of truth. The air was charged with anticipation as they entered the ring. The fight began with a flurry of movement, with both fighters circling each other warily. Suddenly, Ciela struck, her lithe body darting forward with lightning speed. Napoleon countered with a powerful blow, but Ciela managed to dodge it with a nimble sidestep. The two of them continued to exchange blows, their movements a blur of motion. Ciela was faster and more agile, darting around Napoleon with lightning quickness. But Napoleon had the advantage of strength and experience, and he used it to his advantage. Despite Napoleon's advantage, it became clear that Ciela had improved significantly since they first started training together. Her movements were more fluid and precise, and she was able to anticipate Napoleon's attacks with increasing accuracy. She landed several blows, each one striking with a resounding thud. Napoleon was impressed by Ciela's progress, and he began to push her even harder. He knew that she had the potential to become a great fighter, and he wanted to help her reach her full potential, for his convenience in the future. The fight continued for what seemed like an eternity. But in the end, it was Napoleon who emerged victorious, ending it with a chokehold. Master, I can't breathe, Ciela gasped, her voice strained as Napoleon released the chokehold and helped her to her feet. Ciela coughed violently, trying to catch her breath. Her body is slick with sweat. Napoleon watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. Ciela nodded weakly, still gasping for air. "I'm fine," she managed to say between coughs. Napoleon's expression softened slightly, and he laid a hand on her shoulder. "You did well. I did what you ask, not holding back." "I know." Ciela exhaled. "I can feel it from your punches. You didn't go easy on me." Napoleon smiled. "I'm a man of words, you asked for it and I delivered. Come on, we have to return back to the lab, I'm sure the paddle stopped spinning by now." Master, I don't think I would be able to move for a while," Ciela said. "I'm very exhausted right now, please let's take a break first before we return." "But I have to finish the experiment now as it is scheduled," Napoleon said and sighed. He turned his back on her and kneeled. "I'll carry you on my back." Ciela's eyes widened in surprise as Napoleon gestured for her to climb on his back. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was appropriate, but the exhaustion was taking over her body, and she needed the rest. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Napoleon looked over his shoulder at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Of course, I am. I don't want to lose any more time." Ciela nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over her as she climbed onto his back. He stood up slowly, adjusting his grip on her legs, and started walking towards their destination. As they walked, Ciela leaned forward and subtly sniffed the fresh, earthy scent of Napoleon's sweat. It was a comforting smell that reminded her of their training sessions. She closed her eyes, feeling a sense of safety and security being carried by her master. "I'm sorry if I smell due to sweat," Napoleon said. Ciela shook her head. "No, I like this smell." Napoleon chuckled softly. "Is that so?" "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his voice warm. "Am I heavy, master?" Ciela asked. Napoleon's grip on her legs tightened slightly as he adjusted his balance. "No, you're not heavy at all," he said, his tone reassuring. "You're actually quite light, don't worry about it." "That's a relief then." As they continued walking, Ciela couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness with Napoleon. It was rare for him to show this side of him, and she cherished every moment of it. 5 minutes later, they arrived back at the lab. Napoleon gently lowered Ciela off his back and set her down on the floor. She stretched her legs, feeling the soreness fade away slowly. "Thank you for carrying me, master," she said, smiling gratefully at him. Napoleon nodded. "It's nothing. I'm just glad that you're feeling better now," he said, his expression softening. Ciela looked around the lab, noticing that the paddle was no longer spinning. Napoleon walked over to the machine, checking the results of the experiment by dipping a sensitive thermometer into it. "Ciela, I want you to memorize what I'm about to say, Napoleon said. Understood, master. I'm all ears. The initial temperature of the water prior to the rotation of the paddle was recorded at 35 degrees Celsius. However, after allowing the paddle to rotate for a duration of 12 hours, the temperature exhibited a significant increase to 0.08 degrees Celsius. These observations affirm the principle of conversion of mechanical energy to heat via the process of friction. Ciela listened carefully, committing the information to memory. Got it, master. The mechanical energy was converted to heat due to friction, she repeated. Is that all? No, as for the caloric theory, which is the widely accepted theory in the field of heat, this experiment showed that the energy lost by the paddle during rotation, which was measured as an increase in water temperature, was proportional to the work done by the paddle. This indicates that the caloric theory may not be the most accurate explanation for the behavior of heat. Ciela nodded, intrigued by the implications of the experiment. So what does that mean, master? It means that we need to rethink our understanding of heat and energy transfer. This experiment opens up new possibilities for research and discovery in the field of thermodynamics, Napoleon said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Now that we have finished the experiment and we have gathered all the data we needed, the only thing that is left is to have it vetted by officials from the University of Paris and the French Academy of Sciences. Whoever accepted our thesis first, is where we will present it. I'll submit it after my class. As the man walked down the dimly lit hallway, his attire caught the attention of those around him. He was tall and thin with sharp features, and his clothing was made of fine, rich fabrics that were tailored to fit him perfectly. His coat was a deep red, embroidered with gold thread in intricate patterns, and his shirt was a crisp white with a high collar that framed his face. A delicate ruffle tie made of lace and adorned with a small fleur-de-lis brooch matched the ruffles on the cuffs of his coat perfectly. His trousers were black and fitted, and he wore polished leather boots that clicked against the stone floor with each step. The man's regal appearance and confident stride commanded attention, and those who caught a glimpse of him couldn't help but wonder who he was and what business he had in the building. The man arrived at the headmaster's office, who welcomed him. What business do you have with me? The man calmly said as he took his seat. Monsieur Lavoisier, a student from Brienne-le-Château, has submitted a thesis to our university. It was called The Principle of Thermodynamics, and I have taken a glance at it. It seems to be trying to disprove your theory of caloric theory, so I called you here knowing that you might be interested, the headmaster said and continued. I must say, it was solid work. I can see that the student has put a lot of effort into their research. Lavoisier raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the mention of a thesis challenging the caloric theory. I see, he said, folding his hands in his lap. I would like to read this thesis for myself and see what the student has discovered. The headmaster nodded and handed Lavoisier the thesis. As Lavoisier began to read, his eyes widened with excitement. The students' research was impressive, and their conclusions were thought-provoking. This is quite interesting, Lavoisier said, looking up at the headmaster. The students' research seems to indicate that heat is a form of energy, rather than a substance like caloric. Their experiments suggest that the behavior of heat can be explained by the laws of thermodynamics. I would like to meet this man. Well, why don't we allow him to present his thesis at this university? The headmaster suggested. Very well, I'll be the panelist for his presentation, Lavoisier agreed. I would like to test that man's conviction on his theory, Lavoisier smiled. Sir, you called for me? Napoleon asked upon entering the office of the headmaster. Indeed, Napoleon. Please have a seat, I have some news to tell you, the headmaster replied, gesturing to the chair in front of him. Napoleon took his seat and prepared himself for whatever was to come. Napoleon, listen, I did give you my word to inform you that if I were to hear back from the University of Paris about your research, I will tell you right away. And that day has come. Did my work get through? Napoleon asked, looking expectantly at the headmaster. Well, it's best that you read it for yourself because I don't know how to word it for you. The headmaster handed him the letter, which Napoleon quickly opened and perused. Dear Napoleon Bonaparte, we are pleased to inform you that your thesis, Principle of Thermodynamics, has been accepted for presentation at our upcoming scientific conference. Your work has impressed our reviewers and we believe it will be an important addition to the discussions on the science of heat in the scientific community. Do also expect renowned physicists, chemists, and mathematicians to be in attendance at the conference, and we are certain that your presentation will be met with great interest and acclaim. Please let us know as soon as possible if you will be able to attend the conference so that we can make the necessary arrangements. Congratulations on this accomplishment, and we look forward to your participation. Best regards, Augustin de La Fontaine, Dean of the Faculty of Sciences, University of Paris. After finishing reading the letter, the headmaster smiled warmly and spoke. Congratulations, Mr. Bonaparte. You are making a mark in history for being the youngest scientist to have a paper accepted for presentation at the University of Paris. How are you feeling? I honestly don't know what to say. Napoleon said, chuckling. At first I thought they would reject it because it is challenging caloric theory, which was the widely accepted theory in the field of heat. The headmaster nodded in understanding. Yes, it takes courage to challenge the status quo. But that is the essence of science, isn't it? To constantly question and seek answers to better understand the world around us. Napoleon smiled in agreement. Thank you, sir. I will be on my way now to tell this news to my family and personal assistant. If there is nothing else, I'll leave you be. There is one, Mr. Bonaparte, the headmaster said. Since your work is accepted by the University of Paris, the institution has decided to give you a monetary award for your exceptional research. It's not much, but it's a token of appreciation for your hard work. Napoleon was surprised but grateful. Thank you, sir. I'm honored. We will deliver it to your dormitory next week. That's all, prepare for your presentation next week. Napoleon rose to his feet and bowed to the headmaster in gratitude before making his way out of the office. As he walked through the corridors of the school, his mind raced with excitement and nerves. It felt to him that he was getting closer and closer to one of his goals. Should he pass the presentation, his connection with the best scientists and engineers of the era would be guaranteed. However, that won't be the end of it, as Napoleon would have to ensure their safety in the future. Scientists like Antoine Lavoisier died during the Reign of Terror due to their association with the monarchy and their perceived aristocratic sympathies. Now, having them executed would be a huge loss not only for Napoleon but for France. He intended to gather all renowned scientists that lived during the French Revolution and establish a council or a ministry that would work on his modern sciences. The only way to protect them is to join the military, which is what he was doing right now. 5 minutes later, Napoleon arrived at his dormitory. As always, Ciela would open the door for him and greet him with the brightest smile on her face. Welcome back, master. How was your day? She asked excitedly. Napoleon smiled at Ciela's cheerful demeanor and replied, It was a good day, Ciela. My thesis has been accepted for presentation at the University of Paris's scientific conference. Ciela's eyes widened in excitement. That's amazing, master. Congratulations. Thank you, Ciela, Napoleon said, his smile widening. You must be tired, master, that's no good. Come, I got everything ready for you, so all you need to do is sit here, Ciela said, pulling Napoleon by the arm. Napoleon allowed himself to be led by Ciela to his desk, where she had arranged his notes and papers neatly. He sat down and sighed, feeling the tension leaving his body. Thank you, Ciela. You always know what I need, he said, looking up at her with a grateful smile. Ciela smiled back. So master, what would you like to do first? Dinner? Bath? Or perhaps me? Napoleon stared at Ciela for a while, allowing her words to sink into her and realizing that she had just made a suggestive comment. He felt a slight heat rise to his cheeks but quickly composed himself. Where are you learning those words? Now this is making me curious about your past. Ciela gulped and looked down, feeling a bit bashful. I'm sorry, master. Well, we already talked about that, so let's not bring that up. Let's prepare for what's ahead of us. You will come with me to my presentation at the University of Paris. Why? Ciela asked. Would it be appropriate to have your personal maid come by you? Kids who are in nobility have their own butler and maid coming along with them in school, so you coming with me shouldn't be a problem. And let me remind you, you are not my personal maid, you are my assistant. I prefer to call you that way because it sounds cool and professional, Napoleon explained and continued. After all, you have helped me with my thesis, so there's no reason for you not to be there. Ciela's eyes sparkled with joy. Of course, master. It would be my pleasure to accompany you. I'm absolutely sure that you'll do splendidly, and I'd be so happy to be by your side and cheer you on. You sure are enthusiastic, huh? Napoleon remarked. Now, that aside, we have to look formal on the day of the presentation, so I will have to buy you a dress that fits the occasion. Don't worry about the money, as the school has given me a monetary reward. If you say so, master, Ciela bowed her head reverently. The sound of horse hooves echoed through the cobblestone streets of Paris, the city's late 18th century charm apparent in every elegant building and archway they passed. Inside the horse-drawn carriage, Napoleon sat beside Ciela, his eyes fixed on the passing scenery, while Ciela's eyes were fixed on him. The soft breeze of the day carried the sweet aroma of fresh pastries from a nearby bakery, blending with the fresh floral fragrance of the streets. The carriage slowed as it approached the grand entrance of a clothing store, its facade a grand display of fashion and luxury. Ciela felt overwhelmed at the grandeur of the facade and hesitantly asked. Master, isn't this place kind of expensive? I told you to not worry about the price, all I need is for you to look formal for our presentation later, Napoleon reassured her. They stepped out of the carriage and were greeted by a doorman dressed in a black suit, who held open the door for them. The store was bustling with activity, with elegant ladies perusing the latest styles and gentlemen admiring the craftsmanship of tailored suits. Napoleon led Ciela to a section of the store dedicated to women's clothing, his fingers running through the fabrics of the dresses on display. What color do you prefer, Ciela? Napoleon asked simply. Ciela's heart skipped a beat at the question. She had never had the luxury of choosing her own clothing before, let alone having her opinion valued by someone as important as Napoleon. She looked around the section, admiring the various colors and styles. I'm not sure, master, she replied softly. I'm not really good at styles, why don't you choose for me? Napoleon looked through the selection of dresses, running his fingers over the fabrics and examining the different styles. After a few moments, he picked out a casual blue dress made of soft cotton with delicate lace trim. I think this will be perfect for you, Ciela, he said, handing her the dress. Ciela's eyes widened as she took the dress from him. It was simple, yet elegant, and she knew it would be comfortable to wear. It's lovely, master, she said, smiling gratefully at him. As they were browsing clothes, they were approached by a clerk, a middle-aged man with a warm smile on his face. Bonjour, monsieur, mademoiselle. How may I assist you? I already picked this dress for her. Ah, I see, the clerk said, examining the dress. It's a fine choice, sir. Would you like any accessories to go with it? Perhaps a hat or a pair of gloves? What color of gloves do you think would pair best with this dress? Napoleon asked. The clerk considered the dress for a moment before responding. I think a pair of white gloves would complement the dress nicely, monsieur. Okay, we'll take that one. Very well, monsieur. Now that is settled for the lady, how about you? Are you in need of anything else? The clerk asked, turning his attention to Napoleon. Napoleon shook his head. No, thank you. I'm fine as I am. The clerk nodded, bowing slightly. Very well, monsieur. Perhaps you would want to see her in the dress? We have a dressing room reserved for our esteemed customers. Napoleon looked at Ciela, considering his suggestion. That would be nice. It's best that I see how the dress fits her properly before we leave. Ciela nodded in agreement and followed the clerk to the dressing room. While he waited for their return, Napoleon looked around the store to pass the time. He checked the price tags and he couldn't help but be slightly shocked at their prices. They were expensive and only the nobility could afford it. Fortunately, the monetary reward from the Brienne-le-Château had provided him with enough funds to splurge on Ciela without any worry. 2 minutes later. Ciela emerged from the dressing room, her strawberry blonde hair styled in loose waves cascading down her back. The blue dress hugged her slender frame in all the right places, the soft cotton fabric draping elegantly over her developing curves. The delicate lace trim along the neckline and hem added a touch of sophistication to the simple design. Napoleon's eyes widened in awe as he looked at her. He couldn't believe how stunning she looked in the dress. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement as she twirled around, the skirt of the dress swishing around her ankles. Despite her young age of 13, Ciela had a certain grace and elegance that belied her years. If given 4 or 5 years, she would definitely be a beauty to behold, he thought to himself. How do I look, master? Ciela asked, striking a charming pose as she held up the hem of her dress. You look good, Napoleon said stiffly, trying to stop his cheek from tugging his lips to form a smile. That's all? Napoleon chuckled at her playful pout. What do you want me to say? I gave you my comment and there it is. Ciela smiled, I was hoping for something a little more elaborate. I think fewer words would be fine, Napoleon said and turned to the clerk. The dress was beautiful, where can I pay? The clerk led Napoleon to the cash register, ringing up the total for the dress and gloves. Napoleon didn't even flinch at the price as he handed over a few notes of the Brienne-le-Château reward. After the transaction was complete, Napoleon and Ciela stepped out of the store, the crisp Parisian air greeting them. As they walked back to the carriage, Napoleon noticed the way heads turned to look at Ciela, their eyes following her every move. For God's sake, she is 13, what's the problem with those men? Napoleon thought to himself as he helped her board the carriage. Ciela noticed the way Napoleon's expression had changed and looked at him quizzically. Is something wrong, master? Napoleon shook his head, smiling reassuringly at her. No, nothing's wrong. Where to, monsieur? The coachman's voice sounded from the front of the carriage. University of Paris, Napoleon replied, settling into his seat beside Ciela. Okay then. The coachman said as he flicked the reins and the carriage began to move. Ciela leaned back against the plush velvet seat, the rustling of her dress filling the quiet carriage. She looked out the window, taking in the sights and sounds of Paris. There she noticed the mood seemed somber, like it lacks the usual vibrancy and liveliness that Paris was known for. Ciela couldn't quite put her finger on why, but she sensed a certain tension in the air. Napoleon noticed Ciela's expression as she looked out the window. Is everything all right, Ciela? He asked, concerned. I don't know, Ciela replied, still gazing out the window. It's just that the city seems different somehow. It's like everyone's worried about something. Napoleon nodded in agreement. Yes, the economic situation in France has been difficult lately. It's affecting the mood of the people. Ciela looked at Napoleon, surprised. She had never heard him talk about the economy before. What's wrong with the economy? Well, to put it simply, France is in a lot of debt. We've been spending more than we can afford, and it's catching up to us. The government is struggling to balance the budget, and the people are feeling the effects. Prices for goods and services have gone up, and many people are struggling to make ends meet. Ciela listened intently, trying to understand. But why did France spend so much in the first place? Napoleon sighed. There are a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest is our involvement in the American Revolution. We supported the American colonists in their fight for independence from Britain, which cost us a lot of money. And then there's the fact that the French monarchy has been spending extravagantly for years. Not to mention the fact that the nobilities pay little to no taxes. Sooner or later, it will blow up in their faces. I see. Ciela mumbled. Well, let's not worry about it, it's not our job. We have to get ourselves ready for the presentation. You are right, Ciela said, and silence fell over the carriage.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.